welcome to the last meeting of 2019 for the Shorewood School Board, December 10th, 2019. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and our first agenda item is to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, any changes or? No? All right, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Dr. Davis, can you remind us of our overarching result?
Yes, our overarching result for the School District of Shorewood is that our students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Thank you. Awards and recognitions tonight?
Yeah, first I'd like to recognize the Shorewood Athletic Boosters Club and all the volunteers who spent time and effort to make the recent 40th annual Shorewood Arts and Crafts Fair a success. Our athletic programs benefit greatly from the fair, and we're lucky to have such dedicated organizers. So thank you for everybody who contributed to that. Also want to recognize SHS PE teacher James Waslaski, and students who were featured in the recent TMJ4 segment, which focused on our new yoga class being offered at the high school. So it was a great piece which highlighted the benefits of taking yoga, such as mindfulness and resilience. Great work to James and all of those that have been involved in implementing the new class. And that concludes the recognitions and awards for tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, so for student achievement and results, we're going to hear about the Drama Junior program.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Justin Calvert. I work for the Recreation Department as one of the supervisors. I'll let all these wonderful people introduce themselves as we go. But one thing that we're going to talk about today is our Drama Junior program. We'll get more into that, but I want to pass around a couple of examples of what we just finished up with. So this past weekend was our show, our production. We do about a 12 to 13 week program, and then it culminates into a 2-night show. We have a Saturday and a Sunday, and the main thing to know about this program is how awesome it is, led by Sarah Van Loon. But the fact that we have kids from represented from all 4 schools coming together, and then adults like us to make this thing work. And then some awesome parent volunteers as well. So take a look at that while we're going around. To start things off, we're going to show you an example of what we do. So this is actually, during our show, Rockstar U, there was a music video portion that 2 high school kids, Jock Butler and Zani Gelbronson, who are volunteers for us, and I'm sorry if I pronounce those names wrong, but they're volunteers, so they don't get paid for their time. And they decided that, Sarah said,
but
you
they're
guys—
graduates of the program.
There you go.
So what it is the show is basically about a university where little kids who want to be rock stars go to become rock stars. And it's all parodies of different ones. This one was a sequel, because this one over here, Zoe Namakapam, insisted before she graduated that we do a sequel. So I did. And this is a group called Breather, which is a parody of Weezer. And they are doing the song Hickory Dickory Dock. All the songs that they do are nursery rhymes that have been recorded in the style by certain, that sound like certain other artists. We had parodies of Eminem and Beyonce and the Who and so forth and so on. And this is Breather. It's Hickory Dickory Dock. We filmed it during one rehearsal, 3-hour rehearsal 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Sounds right, yeah. 3 weeks ago. Yes, it was the Saturday of showcase. And then Jacques and Zani edited it and did some filtering and did some fun stuff. And so this is Hickory Dickory Dock by Breather, sorry.
The mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. Hickory dickory dock, tick tock. Hickory dickory dock. The cow jumped over the clock. The clock struck 2, the cow said moo. Hickory dickory dock, tick tock. Tick tock. Hickory dickory dock. The bee flew up the clock. The clock struck 3, buzz with the bee. Hickory dickory dock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Hickory dickory dock. The horse
So that was just a short, 2-minute example of what, like, the awesome creativity that these kids provide, as well as the staff members to my left and right. And I'm going to pass it off to Sarah. She can give you a little overview of the program and how she created it from scratch. And then we have Zoe to my left and Alex to my right, who are 2 former participants of the program. So they went through it as kids, became volunteers. So they volunteered until they were above of working age, and now currently both work for us. So Zoe's our fantastic costume designer, and Alex does a lot of our music, correct? And then music director, among other roles. And they can speak more. So.
So, for those of you who don't know me, I student taught here in the fall of 2008 with Barb Gensler. And when you student teach in the fall, it's very hard to find a job because of being halfway through the year. And so she hired me, and I was working as the publicist for the drama department, working in the box office. And Deb Stoltz, who used to work in be the head of the rec department, came to me that spring and said, "How would you like to do a drama club this summer?" And I said, "Sure." And so she's like, "All right, we'll write a little play or whatever, come up with some stuff, and we'll have it in the brochure, and if whatever happens, happens." And so I made a musical review called A Musical Stimulus Package, because it was right after President Obama had come out with his stimulus package, and it was it was created through songs from musicals, Broadway musicals, and movie musicals about being rich or being poor. We used Easy Street from Annie, and Money, Money, Money from Mamma Mia, and so forth and so on. And I created little vignettes, and we performed it. I had 8 little girls who are now, I think, all college seniors or college graduates who auditioned. Well, didn't audition, they signed up for it. And at one point, I was going to have a class in the morning and rehearsal in the afternoon, and the class just went bye-bye because nobody wants to sit through, slideshows of the history of musical theater at 10 o'clock in the summer. So we just ended up building the set together. I had about 3 or 4 high school volunteers who would show up and help me, and we built a set out of cardboard. And we figured out all our costumes, and they all played about 9 roles. and we got it done, and it was fun. And we put it on a Monday afternoon, pretty much for about 40, 50 people. And then afterwards, Deb's like, "Well, that was fun." And I said, "Yeah, it was." She's like, "You want to do it next fall?" And at that point, I was long-term subbing for Barb because she was ill at the time. And so I'm like, "Sure." And so we did 3 little one-acts, and we had 12 little girls sign up. Then that turned into a spring show, and I scrambled and found something on the web to do, and just kind of catapulted into what the program we have now, where we're have wait lists in the summer, where we have 50 kids doing professional junior style shows like Winnie the Pooh, Peter Pan. This summer, we're going to be doing Frozen Junior. And the kids are not only learning acting skills, but we have them working. Unlike a lot of theater programs for children, we have technical aspects are also included in what we do. And while sometimes it's, not like during the school year, it's not as vigorous as it is during the summer, where they build the set or paint the set or help to build costumes and things like that. They still understand the concept that there's more than just acting to putting on a theatrical show. I said that I used to put little director's notes in a lot of these programs. This one's from the spring of 2013 and a show, and I just said that we double cast these kids as both performer and technician. They learn a variety of practical life skills that can help them in other areas. They practice patience. We're still working on that one. But anyway, they listen to and cooperate with others. They understand time management. They respect other people's belongings. They help to deal with frustration or with defeat and a lot of other things. Unlike sports, where the outcome is always to win, ultimately it's to win. In theater, it's to create something as a group, and it's not as it can be competitive, but with our group, it's kind of nice because everyone signs up. You're guaranteed a role if you're in the cast. We just have auditions to figure out who's best to fit into what role and that sort of thing. And so Zoe's actually never been on stage. She's always been our one of our technicians, and Alex has been he went up the ranks and even played a couple of leads here and there. So they can really tell you about their experiences as far as what it was like to be a member of Drama Junior. I think Alex is
Sorry. No, you're good. Yeah, so Justin had asked me here today to talk about my experiences because I really do owe a lot of great experiences to not only the Shorewood Rec Department, but especially Shorewood Drama Junior. And I think Shorewood obviously has a very high standard of the arts. Shorewood Drama Junior is a tremendous place to get that started and to keep that standard. And I mean, it really does push you. I remember my first show, I was a turtle. I walked on stage, with my turtle walk, with my turtle shell. Yeah. And my last show, I was Horton the Elephant in Seussical. So, and I was one of the lead roles. And it's just the progression between that time, how much I've grown as an actor, as being able to speak like I am right now to a group of people, being able to sing solos and songs. It's just extraordinary. I mean, myself as a person, I've always been obsessed with music. When I'm home, all I'll do is music when I'm not studying AP Calc. But it's truly been rewarding because this program has not only given me the opportunity to improve that, but to give it back. And the last 2 summer shows, Peter Pan and The Little Mermaid, I was able to music direct the students. And I mean, you'd be surprised how much you could learn when you think you're the expert on music teaching these students. But they push you as much as you push them. So it's just truly a enriching and rewarding experience. And just can't thank Miss Van Loon enough for how much I've grown as not only an actor, musician, but a person as well. So.
All right, so I'm a senior now, so I'm applying to colleges, and I'm writing all of these essays about my extracurriculars, and I'm always writing about drama, because through the years it has become the main part of my life. It's what I do after school and on weekends and over the summer, and all of that traces back to Drama Junior that got me involved in this program to begin with. So I began Drama Junior in 5th grade. As Van Loon was saying, I never wanted to be on stage. In fact, I wasn't even that interested in theater, or so I thought. And I only joined the class at the beginning because I saw my friend in a performance, and I figured it would be something to try at the very least. So now Drama Junior is split into 2 groups, the actors and then the technicians. The actors can be a group of 30, 40 kids. And then the technicians are a much smaller, close-knit group of, at most, 10. During the school year, the technicians are really, each technician works on all of the different parts of it, I could say. So you learn to go through the script and read for the costumes, the props, and the set. You build these tech projects, you add to the stage, you learn how to set up a props table or how to organize costumes. And this school year really helps kids to find what they're interested in within tech. So when I joined in 5th grade, I didn't know what to do. I tried it all. I tried set, I tried props, and then eventually I found costumes, which I've stuck with ever since. After I graduated from the program in 8th grade, I came back to volunteer for my freshman year because I wanted to help the kids and still be involved with the program. And then, as Justin was saying, both Alex and I became paid staff members after some volunteering. What's really remarkable about Drama Junior is that everybody on the staff, except for Miss Van Loon, at least during the year, are graduates of the program. So everybody involved, not only are the kids getting practice on the acting side, singing, dancing, on the tech side, set, props, costumes, but then it's also excellent experience for people like Alex and I who get this remarkable professional experience that would just be impossible anywhere else. After I became a paid staff member, I did similar projects to what I was doing, and then I eventually became costume designer, which is what I do now over the summer. for that, it's remarkable experience going through the script, deciding all of the costumes, getting to draw renderings and present to the kids. Like Alex was saying, I'm still learning now from the program, and it's helping me to become better at costume designing, and which I will likely continue with through college. Ultimately, Drama Junior is such a remarkable program because it involves students from all ages, and it helps kids that are in elementary school to become involved and continue with the program through middle school, high school, and maybe even college.
I just wanted to add one thing. I don't know if many of you know this or not, but during the school year, the 2 shows that we do are originals that I usually write. The summer we do the prefabs, and I'll tell you, this has pushed me as a part of my undergraduate, and I've always been a writer if you ask my mother, but it really has pushed me to come up with more and more creative ideas. I do involve the kids sometimes. Like I was just saying, we were talking, Sunday night was our cast party after our show, and I was asking them what kind of genre, we haven't done in a while, what would you be interested in? When kids like, we should do a horror movie musical where all the songs are in a major key. And I'm like, okay, that, I don't know if I can handle that or not. But I've done, I've adapted Shakespeare. I've written a radio play. Last spring, I wrote a full-length child's play about imaginary friends. And there's a lot of other things that I've done adapting, and we've done a version of a Marx Brothers movie. We did a play that involved all these literary characters who are in public domain, which was a trial where 9 of the most horrible villains from literature were on trial for corrupting the souls of for corrupting young readers. And at the end, we had the audience vote on whether or not, we laid out the case, and we had lawyers. We had a judge. He was the judge. And the audience voted on whether they were guilty or non-guilty, and we had 2 different endings that we rehearsed, and whatever the audience decided was what we did for the ending for that one. So and I introduced them to Shakespeare, and we do puppetry. So they learn a lot about other things other than theater. This last time, they learned a lot about the history of rock and roll. And so this next spring, we're doing a show about America and some of the things that people don't know, and celebrating some big anniversaries that are coming up, like the 150th anniversary of Major League Baseball, 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote, and a lot of things like that. Just so they get a well-rounded education. It's not just theater, it's a lot of things. So.
I think the last point I want to add, and I can open up for any questions if any of you have it, but I just love how outside of Sarah, myself, and a couple awesome parent volunteers, it's all student-based. I mean, all the rest of our staff are high school students, and volunteers are high school students, and then the program is middle school and elementary. So, outside of Sarah, everyone else is technically a kid, that's just remarkable to me. So, any questions from you guys?
And 3 of you up there have already had kids go through the program, so I'm pretty sure you pretty much know it. So.
I keep trying. I keep trying to get my daughter to do it. Well, some years she will.
Yeah.
Sarah, it's not really a question. It's more just, I think I have known that you do, that you do the writing of the book classes. But I don't know that the community knows that enough, and that we should publicize that more, that you're doing original works twice a year, and that's incredible, and just such a commitment to the program and the awesomeness that it is. So I think I'm gonna put that out there, every time the show comes up, be like, these are original productions. So
one of these days I'll get my act together and I'll publish some too, so people can actually read them themselves.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I mean, Mira's, this was her 7th show maybe?
Yep.
I mean, she would never miss one. We plan all our vacations around Drama Junior. So, but I will say this, the other thing that I think is so fantastic is that 40 kids who have very different comfort levels and abilities, any ability can be in the show. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate how you find a space for every person who wants to be part of that space. and they feel welcome. Like, you can tell at the end of the show that they all feel like this was me, you know, and they're so proud. So it's a fantastic thing to watch.
One last thing. As a parent who's had kids graduate through the high school already that have been a part of that program, just wanted you to know that he still talks about it. Camp days, one, not two. But I just wanted to acknowledge, I don't have a question, I just wanted to acknowledge that it did make a huge difference in the kids' lives, the parents as well, because we learn from them as we see them go through that. I'm somebody that could have never done anything that you guys have done behind or on stage, but two of my kids can, and it's because of that program.
He will forever be my Willy Wonka. So.
Thank you. It's
Thank-
it's
oh,
really
sorry.
impressive. Sorry, just echoing what others said about how student driven it is. So thank you. That's really impressive.
Oh, I have a cumulative list at home of how many people have been in it, and I think I haven't updated it in probably like 2 shows or, but we're getting really close to the 400 level. So 400 kids since the beginning have, and that's repeats as well as like just one-timers and people whose friends drag them off the street. You have to do this, and they do it for a summer, and they're like, oh, I'm not doing that again. So yeah, as far as comfort level, you know, some kids come in and they're just like, ugh, and then they end up, you know, being amazing and doing shows at the high school or even going into it. And I'll tell you, Michaela Campbell, shy. She did tech the first time and she didn't talk to anybody, and now she's going to school for it. So
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm in awe. I mean, before you came, you know, this didn't exist, and now it's kind of a hallmark of our community, and it's an expectation, you know, that a lot of kids have. I also want to pay tribute to, you know, one of your mentors, Barb Gensler, who was one of the most profound influences on my life as a student. But just to see, you know, Alex and Zoe here and how you find a space, whether it's tech and making sure the shows run beautifully and nobody ever sees you, but but things are smooth. And then Alex, your compositions at Showcase this year, coming up with your own materials. I had to like double check the program, like, did you really write that song? But just, right, and that's, I mean, the fact that you're writing these, I don't know, a lot of feel-good moments. I know, and this is somewhat separate from this program, but like Showcase, like Clark said, I sit in awe at Showcase because I don't know what I would do if I had to be on stage there. The answer is nothing, but the talents that our students have and the space which you've created and others have created for them to show off, whether it's on stage or behind the scenes. Yeah, I just want to reiterate my thanks.
Thank you all for your support, for letting us speak, and definitely we want to thank Lake Bluff staff as well for allowing us to make a home, as Sarah calls it, over at Lake Bluff. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Great job.
Okay, up next is our first of 3 opportunities for public comment. Anyone? Okay, we'll come back to it. All right, so for district operations, we have 2 reports. The first is a facilities design update from Brian.
Thank you. Just wanted to just continue to update you on our progress regarding our facilities design related to the referendum. So first of all, in a follow-up from a linkage that we had with parents of students with disabilities who talked a lot about a couple spaces. One was the handicap parking potentials at Lake Bluff. I attended the Village Parking and Transportation public session last week and was able to touch base with Village Administrator Ewald along with Walker Consultants who are actually conducting the study. And talked to them about the possibility of having some ADA stalls that would be right on Lake Bluff Boulevard on the street. And so I was encouraged to hear that they were certainly open to the idea and that should be submitted as part of the part of the public feedback to be part of the final study. So I'll be working on that, and then also was encouraged to hear that there was openness to really having kind of a school section and looking at all of our schools. So if there's any ADA accessibility, parking issues, or accessibility issues that needed to be addressed, that we could put that in the report also. So that's something I'm working with the principals on to make sure that that is part of that final study. When I talked to Walker Consultants, they had emphasized that the village may choose to implement some of the items immediately, and then would have the ability to authorize that based on that report. So we'll look forward to continuing to work with our village officials on trying to make that space more accessible. And again, just a follow-up from what we had at the linkage. I'll also say, and this is part of the next section on design development, as we're working through the final stages of our design phase, one of the areas that was also brought up at that linkage was the old home economics space at the high school in the Art and Sciences building. That's currently used for many of our special ed students. So I spent some time this morning as part of our review at the high school with Principal Kenny, looking at that space, and we've got some plans in place and modified the design to be able to get that room that was kind of the old home ec room to be more customized to be kind of symbolic of like a studio living space that we could do some living skills and then a classroom in the other half of the room. So we're looking at bringing that design part of that forward and getting that costed out as part of what we do. So just wanted to follow up with you on that as we're working through that design process. Overall, where we are in the design phase is really at the end. So putting the finishing touches on those. That includes feedback from staff that we'd received and any feedback that we had received as linkages or other meetings. So as we'll be finishing that up in this month, then bringing to you a projected budget on the developmental design set in January as just here's where we are at this place in time. And then from there, we'll be looking at beginning to put together construction documents. So that's the transition from design to construction documents, and that's where things are really solidified. So at the end of that, the design phase, to come back and to change any plans would be much more expensive and difficult because you've got all of the subcontractors that are involved in putting together those design packages. So that's where we are at this point, and just wanted to give you an update on that. So, any questions?
I think it was my memory that those costing projections for the home ec room were going to be in January, and that we'd follow up with the parents from the linkage on those issues. Is that still the case?
Yes, yeah, that's the case. So that it needs to be part of that larger kind of pricing conversation. So yes, okay. But we did review that today. We just reviewed like the idea, the concepts today. So that's what we looked at.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, oh, go ahead.
No, I think.
I was gonna say, do you have an update on the OE RFP? Or sorry, the owner's rep RFP?
So I don't at this point. So that's something I haven't talked to Marta about that. I think I'd have to go back and look at what the deadline was. So I'm not sure what we've received at this point. So that'd be maybe a good question for Marta.
Yeah, because this month is the month they were doing that.
The walkthroughs are coming up. Yeah. So I haven't checked in with her on
with
that.
the possible.
With the possible, yes, candidates. Yep.
So on, I'm just trying to understand what a design development set is. Is that gonna have, I mean, should we expect just really detailed renderings? Are we gonna have like line item dollar estimates? What would those look like exactly?
What would
What we're gonna see in January, what will that look like?
Yeah, so it'll be line items and categories, so not like each individual thing, because there's a whole set of things as we would look at it. And then, I mean, the details of the designs are pretty extensive, so it would largely be kind of the larger, kind of bigger picture floor plans is what you would see. I mean, we've got a lot of different like levels that you could go to, but more so just the bigger picture floor plans, and then the budgeting piece, because that's the part that we have to see kind of where things came in at, and if there's some things that we need to prioritize to be able to certainly be within the $65 million, and then that'd be part of the conversation.
And again, the
that time,
costs will be estimates ahead of actually bidding?
Correct.
Yeah.
Getting bids? Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah. So it would be basically the step before getting the construction documents and then being able to move into the bidding process, which will be in the spring.
Okay. And then is EUA gonna be here to talk through those?
And
events,
Myring,
or-
yeah,
okay.
yeah. They'll both be here to be able to talk through that and answer any questions that you have or any
Would
of
it be
that.
similar level that they had when we were at the linkage for parents with children with special needs?
Yeah, as far as like what you would see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was
Yeah.
really helpful to
Yeah.
them, I think, and us, because we were able to ask questions. We could drill down and say, yes, see, it's right.
Yeah, and looking at that space. Yeah, that would be the level of those floor plans.
And then the other question I had was on the timing of could you go over the timing again real quick on the parking needs that we might have at each of the schools? I know Lake Bluff was one that was the topic of that discussion, but
Yeah.
you also acknowledged that we were gonna have the opportunity to see what Atwater might need as well. But what's the timing around all of that again?
Yeah, so that's something I need to be able to get into the consultants soon. So this week, ideally, to be able to have that be part of the report. That report, I believe, is going to the village board in January.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, and then and that would be for their review. So I'm hopeful that village board can look at the study and that we can expedite some of that work. But my understanding is it's scheduled for January.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. And then our second report is on a school safety debrief. So an opportunity to hear a little bit more about kind of the takeaways from the school safety incident from a few weeks ago, and look at what our district does in terms of safety training. And then I also asked about SEL and character ed and bullying curriculum. So.
Yeah, so I'll invite Principal Kenny to come up to be part of this report. So first of all, I guess I want to emphasize that safety is our number one priority as we're looking at keeping our kids and staff safe on a regular basis. Based on the incident that we had at the high school, I can assure the community we've done everything that we can possible as we're moving forward to make sure that our school's safe without going into any details that would compromise student privacy laws. That we've done everything that we can as we're moving forward. But I just wanted to be able to share also just some of the timing of when we do our drills from a building standpoint, and then have Principal Kenny talk a little bit about the high school specifically. So for the last 3 years, we've conducted a safety week at all 4 of our schools. So that happens on the first months of the school year. This year we had safety week September 9th through the 13th. So this is an opportunity for all of our schools to practice their safety drills related to fire, severe weather, evacuations, and lockdowns. Communications were sent to parents during this week and drills were conducted. And that's something that we report to the Department of Justice on an annual basis. In addition to Safety Week, we also provide safety training for our staff during the summers and during our in-service times. So that training includes nonviolent crisis intervention training for situations so they don't escalate bigger than they already are. And then also ALICE training, which stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And so that's more of for active shooter situations, or is an option that we look at for our active shooter types of situations. So I just wanted to be able to provide you with that background. That's something that we do on an annual basis. And again, Principal Kenny's here to talk about just some of his reflections from the situation that we had a couple of weeks ago. Again, he can't talk about any specifics of the case, but again, just reflections. And as we have these situations, we meet to debrief and making sure that we're improving our processes as we're moving forward. And so I just wanted Principal Kenny to be able to share some of his insights.
All right, how's everybody doing? So, been spending a lot of time thinking about and reflecting on the incident at the high school. I think there was a number of things that went well. I think that to me, the number one thing is that we had a very brave student willing to come forward when a perceived threat was observed and reported it to adults right away who were able to take action. I think that's a really important piece and something that I continue to reflect on. And I'll note in my other comments here. So I've been thinking, there's a couple things that are actions that we can take. And then a couple others are going to be ongoing conversations and continued reflections across the district with other administrators. So one area for sure, hopefully we'll never have to implement this, but as part of our initial communication, we should have indicated to the community that the list of student names that were on the list, that we would be contacting all the parents of the students on the list and informing them of that. I think that was an important piece. Difficult phone conversations, empathizing if my child's name was on the list. However, there was a lot of people in the community wondering, is my kid's name on the list and stuff? So that's a pretty important communication point that we should have done better with. In the event that we'd ever have to do that again, we won't make that mistake again. But again, hopefully won't have to. In talking with Joe Paddock, the assistant principal, been working through, now this takes us back kind of to the start of the school year. Over the summer, we usually do, not usually, every summer, we do an update to the parent-student handbook and just bring everything up to date. And one of the additions that we'd like to include is more safety information within the handbook, particularly with regard to referencing code of conduct in situations as it relates to serious threats, like really addressing it. But everybody signs off on the parent-student handbook, and I don't have a super high level of confidence that people read it page for page. So an important action step is going to be addressing these types of situations at the class meetings at the start of the school year. Now, the class meetings occur in the first week of school. Typically, we've done them on the second day of school, and the class meetings are in the auditorium, and we bring each class in, grade 9, 10, 11, 12, where they meet with essentially me and Mr. Paddock. And school counselors usually available also to share some information, but we go through some pretty important topics, and we do talk a lot about code of conduct. This is a place where we address bullying as it relates to in the hallways as a possibility, or cyberbullying and things like that. But I think there's a real need to be pretty explicit about the serious threats that that we had at our school and that we're seeing occur in other schools, and just really being very clear in the meetings. So that will be an extra layer that we can put into place. Since those are the two action steps, do you have any questions on those or anything I've said up to this point? Because then I kind of get into the I wonders and continue reflection.
Can you talk more about what would be, you talked about the meeting with the class. Are you saying like expectations for kids to understand what they need to do if they have identified a threat, or expectations like you must never bring a weapon to school?
Both.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so speaking to that, right, so what do you do if you're getting picked on by somebody at school as well? So just moving away from like, okay, so you can't create a list. Like, I'm talking about like, so what are the supports that are available to you if you're having a conflict that you're having difficulty getting resolved and need some assistance? Bullying or just conflict resolution, right? I mean, we deal with that on a daily basis, certainly, and it all speaks to that building relationships, having a trusted adult that students can talk to, and that's a really important part of our work as we continue that. So, thanks for that question. Yep.
Can I ask a question? So is there an opportunity when, like during maybe orientation, where parents are kind of brought up to speed on what's in the code of conduct as well? I mean, I think your point about people not reading it is probably true. And so is there a time when you have an opportunity to talk to parents as well about that? Or do you already during, I guess I've never sat through a freshman orientation or transition.
I mean, it's a good point. We could certainly layer that in. We have 2 freshman orientations that we host. So one is usually in late January, early February. And that's kind of more, here's an overview of Shorewood High School, because the students in 8th grade are about to pick their classes and stuff for next year. So it's kind of more of a general overview. And then the one that we do the week before school is going to start is a real nuts and bolts one. Like, here's what the first day of school is going to look like, et cetera. So that could be a time that we could certainly speak to some of that. I have to think through that pretty carefully, because at that point I'm standing in front of a room of pretty giddy and nervous students about to begin their high school career. I don't want to scare anybody at that point, but these are pretty serious topics that
Yeah, and I
that
guess
we
I'm
can-
thinking
that
more
we can
about
touch
just
on.
more information to parents to understand like what the process is, not necessarily, like I feel like there's the student piece, right, where students
Mhm.
need to understand what's happening and like the processes, but then there seems to be like, you know, communication to parents, and this is what the steps are, and like all those pieces that are in some ways I think outlined in the code of conduct, but not necessarily, I don't know if the communication piece is in the code of conduct, for example. And then maybe explaining some of the ways, I think, you know, I've had questions about understanding the fact that we don't have a zero tolerance policy. And so what does that mean? And what does that look like? And I think those are parent questions versus student questions.
In addition to that, from a parent perspective too, I think one of the things that we struggled with, or at least I did, was not being able to share specific information. While people may understand that I'm not able to share certain information, they didn't understand why I wasn't able to share certain information until it had gone down the road a ways. I think we were all struggling with that. So if there's some way that we can figure out, well, I think most of us will know now, but some way that we can figure out what it is we can and can't do, because there's a lot of steps that get done that you just can't share for either safety reasons, or you can't tell what happened for confidentiality reasons. And I think once I explained that to parents, it didn't mean that they were okay with it. They acknowledged they would understand it, but that would at least help from the communication standpoint with parents. It's not really necessarily going to be a student issue. I mean, for the students, that would, your plan, I think, would help too, because I know we had some students that said, thank you, while I didn't know what the protocol was or what you were doing, I was glad to know that you took care of it and I didn't even know it was happening. There were certain students that said that, but the other question I had, and I don't know that if it's necessarily for you, Tim, but don't we have to address these similar types of things for the other schools as well, like SIS? Do we have those similar conversations for students at the same time or of the year, or do we we mirror that, is what I'm asking?
Yes. So so at each of our schools,
His suggestions, like make sure that we do what he's doing at the next ones too.
yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah, we can certainly come back and share that back at the administrative team. But we do address bullying at each one of the schools. Part of that is looking at our social emotional learning curriculum that we have at the elementary schools. So specifically looking at bullying. That includes cyberbullying throughout that process, and that's a curriculum that we work through. 6th grade uses a curriculum called Act Now from Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. So there's quite a bit, and that's the cruise situations are kind of classroom circles and more dialogue and that type of thing. So that's consistent across both elementary schools. At the intermediate school, so they have conversations, as Principal Kenny said, as part of orientation. But something that they can build in. But SIS has had that at orientation, along with some resources, one being supporting a safe and bully-free environment at SIS. So those resources have been noted and are available as part of orientation. Restorative practices are really important, and one of our areas of focus at SIS and how to resolve conflict and that process as we're working through restoring harm that's done, and just healthy relationships. Specifically as far as curriculum aspect at SIS, the health and wellness curriculum in 7th grade focuses on mental and social wellness units that include bullying prevention. So that's also part of the dialogue that students are able to get as part of the intermediate school. So we do have it scaled up. Again, certainly we can always get better and always looking for improvements in resources, but it is something that's addressed at each level.
Right, I get, just to clarify my comment, I don't think I was clear enough, but the suggestion, Tim, that you had, the suggestion that you had about kind of putting it right in the face of the kids, right? This is what happens, this is what you do and don't do, and this is what happens if we have this kind of situation. Is that something that we should be doing at SIS as well, at that same time that we're talking about bullying and cyberbullying? Because I think
Kind of on the consequences, I mean?
Well,
Or-
yeah, but I
yeah.
think the way I interpreted what you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things I interpreted about what you were saying was when you have that discussion with the students at the beginning, you address this topic straight. You don't say, you know what I mean? You don't say, well, if something were to happen, we now know we've had an incident that we had to handle, so that you say weapons, shooter scenario, all this kind of stuff, we have plans for that. Whatever your suggested communication is, do we do something similar to that at SIS at the same time we're talking about bullying? Because I think, you could tell kids not to bring a gun to school or not bring a weapon to school, but I don't know.
Yeah, getting at some of the
Yeah,
root
exactly.
causes.
Just
Right.
just talk about it.
Right.
And I think to Parry's point about parents, I think, we've heard, I guess for a couple of years, and I know I've heard it, PTO meetings for years, like, until there's an incident, often parents aren't really looking at the code of conduct until sometimes until their child is involved. So, I think even from the elementary level on up, it might be helpful to have an opportunity where there's a face-to-face meeting, or it's part of parent orientation to talk through those things, like just the way we, hear from the art teacher, that we hear from administrators and the dean of students. Here is our discipline model. Here's the code of conduct. When we talk about restorative practices, what does that mean? Because I think it can mean a lot of different things. And then again, explaining we don't have a zero tolerance policy. Here's why. Here's our model, and here's what happens. And then also explaining things like the student privacy rules that keep. Here's why you might not hear follow up if your kid witnesses a fight. You might not know what happened later. Just to explain why that is, so that parents have at least an opportunity to learn that ahead of time.
You should also echo the privacy and
Yeah.
echo the privacy and confidentiality when you're trying to encourage the kids to speak up as well. I mean, all we can do is tell them that you're going to try to protect them, and they kind of have to take that. But repeating it over and over again, at least I found, not in this situation, but in similar situation with trying to build a speak up culture, it's not easy because there's that fear of retaliation all the time. It doesn't matter if I know I'm not going to retaliate because I'm the one looking into the matters. I know I'm not going to retaliate. I have to build that trust with them that I'm not going to. And one of the ways to do that is to share generally, what are we doing when we handle these situations, right? To give confidence to these kids. And I think
Give a description of how this is going to work.
We don't have to give them details.
No, but how the process is going to unfold to try to instill some confidence. Yes. Yeah.
Did you have other things on your list that you were going to tell us? Because I have some other questions that are more, kind of high-level questions. But if you had more information to share, then I'll wait to ask those.
Well, like I said, it was just kind of just some things that I'm always thinking about. It's
I want
not
to
so
know
much.
what you're thinking about, though, in this situation.
What's that?
I want to know what you're thinking about. When it
Well,
comes
Clark's
to
still
this
one of them
situation.
because that's definitely been one of the biggest challenges. It's quite all right, Because that to me is like when situations arise like this, you know, we have to adhere to the student privacy laws. And one of the biggest challenges that comes with being so limited in the information that we're able to provide is, like, I mean, I understand all that, and like Clark said, and I'll echo that. I've had numerous conversations with parents that say, no, I understand that. The challenge is how do you provide comfort in a situation like this? Like, I'm doing this job because I want to help people, and that's tough. That's tough to do. How do I advocate to be able to provide enough information that I can legally, and provide some sort of confidence or comfort, I guess, is probably the good word to use in a particular situation like that. So that's just something I always think about, and how, with how much information we can give, how to try to like stave off like misinformation that can come out of speculation about things because we're limited in how much we can share, because that runs counter to being able to try to heal when a situation like this comes up. So that's just something I'm always thinking about and talking with people about. And another thing is that, you know, we have a lot of supports in place for students on a number of levels, from academic, social, emotional. You know, we have behavior plans, we do regular check-ins, our school counselors do. You know, we're about to be able to provide therapy services, thanks to our partnership through Children's Hospital. But we do have a lot of students who have relationships with trusted adults in the buildings where they can receive advice about all kinds of things outside the classroom. And maybe they're getting help resolving some social type of situations that teens are dealing with in this day and age. And it's not something that would necessarily rise to the level of needing an intensive intervention or necessarily having to talk to school counselors. So my wonder in this is I think we do a really good job of that inside each school, but when you go to the transition points, when a student moves from elementary to SIS and then 2 short years later comes from SIS to SHS, how do you continue to bridge that? So I mean, it comes down to how can we improve on the building of the relationships, right? Be a glorious day when we can achieve 100% of our students will just say, oh yeah, I have a trusted adult at Shorewood High School or in any of our schools. But we're not there, and it's something that we got to continue to work on. So that's just kind of my continued takeaway and thought that I had about that. So
A couple of years ago, we were talking about a strategy to help get to that 100% in terms of having every single student in every single one of our buildings feel a connection to at least one adult, a strong connection to a trusted adult. One of the practices that was shared was literally having all the names of students up, somewhere visible, and to have teachers and faculty and staff walk around and identify whom they thought they had might have that connection with them. Of course, the perception might be very different if it's going the other way, right? A teacher might feel like, wow, these 10 students really trust me, and students might not receive
that might not be the case, right?
Right. But it's a starting
challenge,
point,
yes.
and I'm wondering, have you tried things like that? Because that's when you see the gaps. That's when you see a kid that has 3 or 4 stars next to their name because 3 or 4 teachers feel a strong connection to them, and that's when you start seeing the outliers, the kids with whom nobody is connecting. And I'm just wondering if that's a strategy we had heard about a couple years ago, and I'm just wondering if you tried it, and if not, maybe be something to consider.
Yeah. No, haven't tried it. Yes, absolutely, we'll consider it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Did you have another question?
I did. It was about Alice. And Alice training, and multi-pronged question. How do you go about training the staff? Is it a train the trainer type model? And secondly, how much do students know about Alice? Are students taught or trained to some degree? And that's a double-edged sword, because there's a lot of folks that sometimes that raises the anxiety, and that might not be the most pedagogically sound thing to do. And I'm just curious as to your thoughts. So the first part, how do you actually get the Alice training spread throughout the school, and then the second part, that student connection. And I'm not saying I have an answer to what the right approach is. I'm just curious as to what.
So the ALICE training with staff, we take care of that in the in-service week prior to the start of the school year. So we're on kind of an every other year cycle of where we'll do a full-on training with all the teachers. Okay, so that includes simulation of active shooter type of situations, complete with Nerf guns and running through various scenarios. It's pretty intense. It's pretty intense, even though it's all just drills and practice. It has elicited some pretty powerful emotions. So so part of that training, so like various scenarios would be that we would put groups of teachers into classrooms, and then we would use the barricade portion of the ALICE training, right? So prevent somebody from getting into the room. So the days of just turn off the lights and hide in a corner of the room are over. It's stack as much furniture in front of that door as you possibly can to find a way to stop the door from being open. So we had the teachers go through and practice actually doing that.
Just at the high school or district-wide?
It's a district-wide. Yes, I mean the building principals, administration. So Mr. Paddock and I take care of doing the high school trainings. Joe is he's received more ALICE training, so has graciously served as a consultant for other buildings if need be and participated. But and so then we did a review with so all new teachers then receive that type of training as part of their new teacher in service this year. But then we go through it's a PowerPoint informational slide reminders about what ALICE training is all about, and if you have additional questions or want to go through things more extensively, that's just part of the training. So next year, again, we will go through the full-on training. With our students, so we talk to our students, an important piece of the ALICE training is for students to follow the direction of the adult who's in charge of the room, right? Because a lot of that is utilizing your senses in a situation where there could be a crisis. So if you have the opportunity to evacuate, in other words, run away, you'll take that. Or if a teacher would say, or whoever the adult is in charge, that we need to barricade the door, you need to do that. We have not practiced that explicitly with students, but we do communicate with them about the importance of listening to the adult who's in charge of the room. So, and trusting their senses. So.
Sadie and Jack, what do you remember about the drills, and like, what do you have a sense of sort of what to do?
Not in an active shooter situation. I really, if I were to be alone in a room, I would probably just turn off the light and hide in a corner, because no one has really told me what to do. I mean, maybe they have, I just don't remember. But I feel like students need more training on what to do in an active shooter situation, because I never heard of ALICE since this moment. So I feel like it's definitely, we should be more aware of what really needs to be done. I know to listen to an adult, but I feel like we need to learn what the intervention is and kind of what's going through the adult's brain. Not that I would ever disobey an adult and
Of course not.
or use my own.
Her dad's yes, correct.
I feel like we definitely need to understand, maybe not go through simulations, not do as much training as the teachers do, but really get a deeper understanding of what would be done in an active shooter situation, for sure.
Would that be something, Tim, that you could address at that training you were talking about at the beginning of the year, or the school?
Well, they do a soft lockdown and a hard. What do you do during?
We just do a soft lockdown.
You do a soft lockdown.
True.
So that would be the time. So safety week would really be the time where we would work through and have those conversations that Sadie's talking about during the lockdown, and walk through some of those situations, talk about here's what our mindset is, and that type of thing.
I wonder if that wouldn't be beneficial to have during safety week parent conversations in that. If you're doing that with my second grader or fifth grader, I kind of want to know what that would be like as a parent to go through that and have that conversation with them, I think. And to have some of these bigger conversations during safety week about internal and external threats and how we as a district have these systems in place, but also do these other things. I feel like because this situation has happened, and because of all of the situations that have happened in the area in the last couple of weeks, there's a for me as a parent, a renewed focus on understanding.
Sure.
And I'm curious about what we're talking with other districts. What are we learning from those districts so that we don't have to go through a situation like they did, that we can learn best practices from each other, from all kind of, again, internal and external threats. I was sort of curious about a police debrief and if the chief has shared with you his thoughts on the situation and kind of best practices from his perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Tim and I have had conversations with Chief and just working through with not only Chief but then the officers that were there that day. So, from my conversations, and Tim can share his also, they believe that that situation was handled well as far as like the response to be able to have an officer come and help support, evaluate the situation, decisions that were made as far as lockdown or not lockdown. And then, we always work closely with the police department as far as communications that are coming out. So whether it's, piggybacking on the police report, or because sometimes they can provide more details than we can from a student confidentiality standpoint. So those are some things that we had talked about as part of the debrief. So I don't know, Tim, did you have anything more?
Was your question
I was just
more specific or kind of just larger in general?
Kind of gets to it. Just as I know you guys talk to him regularly, so I want to make sure that if he has thoughts and continuous thoughts, because
Right.
at the community conversation, it was interesting to hear just how police practices have changed and adapted
Right.
through situation to situation.
Yeah.
I was also curious, and I want to acknowledge that I'm sure when you guys went to school, you didn't think about getting degrees in school security and some of these things that administrators have to deal with, and so I do want to acknowledge that. It was recommended to me by someone who's intimate with school safety, and so it was recommended that we do a third-party review by kind of an outside expert. And so I was intrigued by that. When it came to me the week of the situation, I was kind of like, yes, I forwarded it and kind of stepped back. But I'm interested in your thoughts on doing something like that, just to have kind of a bigger, I guess, more intimate review of what, our policies are and how we handled it, and both from a security standpoint, from a building standpoint too. I know we're doing so much with the referendum dollars and improving security. I know we've done a lot with improving security, but I'm curious if there would be if it would be beneficial to do something like that.
Yeah, I think that certainly can be something we can do. I actually had a conversation today with one of my former colleagues from Green Bay, who's an executive director of one of the state associations on school safety. So I know he's got a lot of field experience, but also just from an executive director standpoint. So that's something that his association does, and just really kind of helps come and support. So I would certainly want to get that costed out and see, because there's multiple people,
Right.
organizations that do that. And then certainly make sure that we're working closely with our police department, like in that process. So that could be I think a good learning experience for us. And as you had mentioned, be able to take kind of best practices that are around that to make sure that we've got those kind of folded in. So that's something that I think at this point in time could be beneficial. Hillary, can I go back to just the parent communications? So in your mind, are you thinking of that as like a night, like an option, a night forum where that it would be part of the conversation, in addition to like because right now our communications are letters that are sent home during that week.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, some spaces to have some dialogue during that week, to be able to ask questions and some back and forth.
I think so, because thinking about our conversation at the last board meeting and at other conversations that we have had around this, and how we've talked about more of a web for student support and just safety, kind of safety, big safety. I know I get that letter about the safety week and I ask my kids about it, but I don't know that I fully think through what that means for them or how that would play out in situations. And how do we escalate it to maybe more of a specific situation, or using examples that have happened in the area? Like, if this were to happen here, what would we do and how would we react, and what have we learned? I know I would attend something like that if we can have more conversations as a community about safety and all these other things about bullying and mental health and, you know, conversations that I think are important to have. And putting that into maybe an annual kind of during safety week, we're going to talk about these issues, and it's all part of the bigger conversation.
Sure. Okay. Good. Yeah, that's helpful. So yeah, I
And
just
that
trying
was
to get a picture of what that
brainstorm
would be.
that I just,
Yeah.
it wasn't, you know, that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is that your? I have a question.
Yeah, no, no.
Here.
Yeah, keep
Yep.
going. I might have one later, but.
No, you gotta be done now. You talked about nonviolent crisis intervention. Is there? Do you know offhand who our like vendor is, or what? Is there a name for like that model that we use?
So it's the Crisis Prevention Institute.
Okay,
It's the
I knew
Nonviolent
about that
Crisis
local.
Intervention.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been a certified trainer for them for 13 years now.
Cool. Okay. I
Yep.
just found out about them. I was curious if we use them. So okay. And you answered another question I had about like new hires, or what if somebody's hired like mid-year, the same thing happen? Like if they're a new employee, they get training on that, or is that a once a year thing where you gather everybody who's new?
We just do it at the start of the school year. Yeah, if we have to onboard somebody in the middle of the school year, which is fairly infrequent, but does
Right.
happen. Did happen recently.
Okay.
It's a pretty personalized orientation, but they're not going through a specific ALICE training at that point.
So that might be an opportunity to just make sure they have some sense of, especially if they've missed, the drill and the safety week.
Right.
That brings to mind, I guess another question I had was just getting a sense of who, like, is it literally every district employee, like including custodians, aides, food service people, or is it like just the teachers?
It's just the teachers.
Okay.
So like Nelson and those.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. It does go a little bit beyond. But when you're talking about the custodians, food service, not so much. My campus supervisors, yes.
Yeah.
They're like,
Okay.
they're all CPI trained and
That's what I
yeah,
thought.
everything. Yeah, thanks.
I wonder if there might be then an opportunity, like I could see, like a custodian might actually like see something that I would think, because they kind of have their eyes on the facilities, like that might be an opportunity to, bolster our training. And also like, if I worked in a school, I would want that training, whether I was scooping food or teaching class.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there barriers to do that? Why we haven't done it before?
The
Or
schedules, right?
is it schedules?
Yeah, I mean, most of it would be, would be scheduling when we bring people in. But I mean, that's as easy as a
Okay.
letter and here's your
Right.
expectations. We'll pay you for your time.
Good.
Coming in there. So
Okay.
yeah, that's something that we can take a look at.
And sorry, I'm looking through my list. And I asked about this by email, but so I'm wondering about our text alert system, and I believe you said there is an emergency alert system for texts in case of an emergency. So can you talk about what rises to that level, and then I believe that would just go to people who've opted in for SMS alerts, because I just personally feel like maybe it's time for us to have a more robust text alert system that includes students, but it sounds like we have some capability, but maybe we're not using it. So I'm interested in what the threshold is, and then also if there's an opportunity to improve that, or maybe it's a matter of changing the threshold.
Yeah, there might be, and Principal Kenny can talk about kind of the student interaction. Usually, like that's used around school cancellations. So, for example, like snow days. So I would send a kind of a voice message, email, and usually the voice gets to people quick. But there's an option for a text alert that's part of that process. So if we just needed to send a text alert, like that's a selection. So we can send email, SMS, or the text alert, and then the voicemail as we would go. So usually it's just around cancellation of schools. Certainly if we had an active shooter types of situation, that's something that we could use from an emergency standpoint. So it would be something that we would want to immediately let people know, don't come to campus, you know, pick your kid up at this space, you know, that we would want to know kind of right away. So.
What are other situations beyond like an active shooter? And I'm thinking about safety, obviously not like weather, but
Yeah.
so, I mean, weapon on campus doesn't rise to that level?
So, again, depends. It just depends on. It would depend on the situation. I mean, most of the time, it would be like a weapon on campus would be. It would just depend on the situation, really.
It would depend on whether you found the weapon with somebody or found the weapon in a garbage can. or
What
you
the
found a
circumstances,
device.
right? What
Could
the
really depend.
circumstances were, kind of whether we felt we needed to immediately contact people for a particular purpose or not. You know, that's really kind of just depends on. It's really contextual to that situation.
Is sort of the criteria for that laid out in our emergency management plan? Like if there's imminent, chance of imminent bodily harm or X, Y, and Z criteria?
Yeah, it's usually it's laid out as kind of the imminent threat, but again that's very contextual. So like to lay out at like every situation, wouldn't be possible. But more of kind of the imminent threat.
And then students are not part of that, or they are, or
Is that through IC?
Yeah,
So-
the campus, right.
Right. So at the beginning of each school year, when parents are doing the online registration,
We have to
there's
decide.
a pleat in there that offers up the I might say pleat. You know, you click on the part that opens. Okay. Where parents have the option of putting in their children's cell phone numbers, and the pleat explains why we would want to gather that information. We could use it for text message purposes. So, like, for example, and again, applying context to every situation is difficult, but let's say something is occurring over our lunch hour, and we want to get a text message to students telling them don't come back to campus. Okay, that would be an example of when something like that could be used. We can push out that text message through Infinite Campus. And we do a test of that during Safety Week also. So if some students reported to us, just, wait, I never got the text message, and then we can go into Infinite Campus and see, that's because we don't have your phone number. And we follow up with an invitation to parents. At that point, once you complete online registration each year, parents can't go back in and add the cell phone numbers in, but they contact the school and add them back in. So we follow up with the communication, inviting people to do that. And we let parents know that we're going to do that as well. Test the system with their students.
So we would, if there was a soft lockdown, would that prompt a text alert?
To the students? No.
Or to anybody? No.
We wouldn't send a text message to all the students in a soft lockdown situation.
Okay, and that's the one where there's a threat around, and so we lock the doors, but it's not a
Teaching
Yeah, that's it.
continues.
teaching.
Right.
But what about, but wouldn't we want students to know not to come back to campus?
In a soft lockdown situation?
Yeah.
If so, in a soft lockdown situation, if there's some sort of something that's happening in the community, I mean, that's, again, we're talking in context. Because if it's happening out in the community, then our campus is a safe location for them to be. If they can't, I don't know. It's a tough one to answer.
But, okay, so, yeah, I get, it's situation specific, but like if they're at home and the threat is closer to school, then we want them to stay home. Right. I guess, but it would depend. Okay.
Sure.
I guess, I don't remember offhand what it says under the option to, give your students phone number, but I wonder if we could add some language that says we use this for safety reasons, and here are, in case there is a threat at school, and that might, encourage more parents to share that number. Just to clarify that it's not just going to be like text about your lunch account, but it's going to be for safety reasons. And then I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know how you all would feel about making that like required, but I just it seems like that given our open campus would be helpful at this point.
We could say it
It's-
would be required, but I would say that it would be strongly encouraged if you put the right language in there when you're registering. This is what we use it for.
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
It's strongly encouraged. We can't require students
And
to
you're still
provide us
not
with
going
their
to
cell
get
phone.
everybody, but
Sure.
most times you'll get a kid that's with somebody who has, theoretically, right?
Right.
If you don't have your phone,
Right.
usually you're not going to get everybody. But
Yep.
you'll be with a friend that has.
Okay, and then, okay, that was one, sorry. Under emergency management plan, one question I had was, I know there's always gonna be situations where discretion is involved, so it's like, if a student has, or like say, a student appears to, like the example of what happened in Waukesha, a student has a weapon, and I'm thinking about the potential for both a bias in response and bias in then like how the emergency is communicated and sort of the level of response that's called for. Like, is there a soft lockdown? Is there a hard lockdown? Do we call the police? Do we handle it with the administrator? Given, I guess my point is that there's all of these opportunities for discretion. And one question I had is whether Sam Coleman could maybe look at the emergency management plan and identify areas where there's a potential for bias to play a role, knowing that Black and brown students are disproportionately perceived as threats. I just want to make sure that we have policy that accounts for those like opportunities for bias to enter, and then the second aspect of that is, can we introduce some, or maybe there already is actually I don't know that there's not, but in your nonviolent crisis intervention that like that includes some discussion of the kind of bias that implicit bias that can enter into your judgment when you're responding to a threat, real or perceived. I just wondered if we have any, if that is like part of the training.
Implicit bias is not specifically part of, or it doesn't come up explicitly in the training, but I can contact the crisis prevention institute and ask them.
Yeah.
Their customer support is excellent. And yeah.
I'd just be curious. So, the last one is support for, and this is about this particular incident. So but I'm being very careful. I'm not asking about specific students, but I wondered about if there's if the student support services have written anything or have sat down to talk about how to offer ongoing support to students who are more directly affected by this incident or any in the future. Like, do we have a protocol for a student who's subject to any threat at any time? That we, that sort of triggers like automatically like weekly check-ins, or that I don't know. I mean, any number of supports that you might offer. And I don't know if you can speak to what the students identified as who were specifically threatened, like what kind of extra support they're getting. But I guess even if you could say yes, there is some planned additional support, I'd be interested in that.
Well, so yes, there was lots of additional support up front in terms of check-ins, student support services, a lot, as we're distancing ourselves from the events. The needs of each individual student may differ in terms of what they need for check-ins and support. Each of our school counselors, as we're just speaking to your point about triggers, and these can be things that can come from a number of places, previous traumas and things where in threatening type of situations can be a trigger. Our school counselors pay very close attention to trying to have that information so that they're aware that there are some students who are going to be affected. So even if a student wasn't specifically named, like in this particular case, doesn't mean that a student isn't going to get triggered by the fact that this just happened altogether based on some previous experience. So, I mean, that's part of the ongoing work. So, I don't know if that was specific enough of an answer
No,
for you.
that's okay. And my last question is the hardest one. Do we know how many students are not coming back to school after this incident, like, or are transferring out, or already have?
I don't have an exact number for you right now,
Okay.
but I know there's some of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to have a number for that one.
I didn't really want to ask, but I felt like it needs to be on the record that we, that this has consequences. So, and not that it's anybody's to blame here, but that it has real consequences for people's education, and not just that day that it doesn't end for students. So, or district. Thanks. I appreciate you being here and answering these questions. This is hard. So.
You're welcome.
So I just had a question about kind of just following up about, I know that the incident happened here at the high school, but thinking more broadly about how you work then with the principals or the principals work together, the administrative team. I'm thinking about some of these kind of larger questions and kind of to your point about like what's age appropriate at different levels as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that's really hard, because we had a school board member recently who felt really strongly that we don't do soft or hard lockdowns. And there is this kind of like alternative concern about the increased anxiety that happens as a result of that. And I guess I'm just curious about how the district has talked amongst themselves about like how to address some of those things, because I think there's definitely that concern as well, right? Like the balance of not creating an atmosphere where students don't feel safe because of the potential of harm, but also giving them opportunities to understand like what to do. And so I'm just curious about like what that has looked like, and if there's been conversations since then, this incident, because I know that there was communication that was rolled out to all the students, and it was age appropriate based on, but at the same time, like since that incident, right, there's been 4 school shootings here in Wisconsin. So it's like, it's part of their like life outside of the school as well. And I just am curious of like what conversations you guys have had around those two pieces, around ensuring that students don't feel increased anxiety, but also addressing their understanding of what safety needs they need to understand.
So you're asking if the 4 building principals have gotten together and talked about that? We have not yet.
But is that something
in terms
that you
of
would
delivery.
do then? Like, or something that, like, because I'm just
Yeah.
curious about, like, how you're going to manage
Okay,
those
so
pieces.
so in my mind, one of the things that I've been talking with Joe about is, okay, so do we practice a barricaded lockdown in the classroom with our students? Do we do that? And then what would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just, we don't have a specific plan for that yet, and it would involve a lot of communication and stuff. But I'd be concerned about that being a triggering event for a number of students. I mean, it was a triggering event when we did the training with the teachers for some of my staff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm
So
just trying to
being
get at
being
like,
aware
how
of
you guys
that
are
is-
trying. You guys are thinking about the fact that there are definitely going to be students who like, and I think we think about it as being for the younger kids, but for all ages, where that level, those kinds of practices are going to be like the thing that actually is the worst thing for them.
Right.
So.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, that's certainly something that we can bring back to the administrative council. I know the building principals work closely with the school psychologists and the counselors to be able to talk through kind of what appropriate language would be developmentally. I know that's something that was provided as part of the follow-up, and also, leaning on staff who know their students the best, and know students that might be more vulnerable in particular situations, and be able to just make sure that we're communicating. A lot of that comes down to tone, comes down to language, and just really refining that and having actual kind of scripts that we would have that would be appropriate to just be able to walk students through that. So I think that's certainly something that we can just continue to think about and then bring that to a district level.
Tim, I'm curious. Our high school counselors do a tremendous job, and they've got a lot of responsibilities. They're one of their main responsibilities is really making sure our students are enrolled in the right courses and getting ready for college. And I'm wondering, how stretched they are in terms of being able to provide support to our students, whereas our elementary and middle school counselors are less concerned with, getting students ready for college and more focused on the whole student, the whole child. And I'm not suggesting that our counselors are not focused on the whole child, but in cases of like bullying, are there records kept? Is there a way, so if a student is ostracized, if a student is isolated, what kinds of steps and procedures, and maybe this is a question for Brian on a district level, but to support those particular students, so it's not just the counselor that knows what's going on, but somehow that is, and this might be a privacy issue, so call me out on that, but is there a way to let like their teachers and their circles know so that those teachers can be extra sensitive to that child, those children's needs?
Yes.
And if so, could you
Mhm.
could you talk us through that? Because I would think that, hypothetically, if a student were being bullied and only one or two adults know, it's not enough. I think, folks in their circle of influence, they're, teachers from 1st through 7th hour and coaches possibly.
So if something rises to the level of being bullying, it's going to come to Mr. Paddock's or my office for sure, for it to be investigated, right? The students can have an opportunity to fill out a bullying or harassment form, and then the investigation ensues right away. Now, the outcome of the investigation then could go a number of different ways. And student privacy law does kick in to a certain extent of we need to get some guidance from the family about what they're comfortable with. Best case scenario, if two students who are having substantial conflict, and I'm describing you pieces of just general conflict resolution at the high school level also. But if the students are in classes together, we could take a look at schedule changes to avoid that, or offer up additional communication to teachers. Like I said, just communicating with the family a lot along the way about how to handle the situation and best address it. So, yeah, I mean, the more people that are aware and can be supportive, the better.
Okay. But
Is
in
that-
terms of like letting maybe the teacher who doesn't have the two kids, right? The bully and the kid who's being victimized. But beyond that, just so others keep an eye out for that kid who's being bullied, so that they make sure to possibly reach out. And when we were talking about connections, that adults in our space make an extra effort to connect with those kids that are maybe feeling isolated.
So beyond classroom teachers, then, our campus supervisors are excellent resources. They're always in the know to be able to assist in situations like this. I don't know, are you suggesting in terms of more of informing the entire faculty?
Not
So
the
they're
entire faculty, but perhaps those teachers that work with a particular student.
Well, that for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Not the
that's
entire
definitely,
faculty.
and that's not a student privacy issue for us
Right, right.
internally.
No, not the entire faculty. Most of the faculty.
That might be a little more problematic.
They don't know most of the students, right? They know their students and the ones that they've had.
So the current teachers, school counselors, campus supervisors,
Are.
that can be, and those are people who can check in with students on a regular basis and keep an eye on them. The classroom teachers on a day-to-day basis also. So.
And the other thing that'll do is help, create that stronger connection between a trusted or an adult, for that adult to become a trusted adult.
Right.
Particularly for those kids that are perhaps, feeling isolated.
Any other questions? Did you have any more?
I didn't have any questions, but I mean, obviously this is an ongoing conversation in some respects. So I was curious about how the conversation continues. because I'm sure there are parents. I know parents have other questions and
Yeah.
other concerns, and so what's the plan for
Yeah.
that?
So one of the things that's in motion now is to take some of the questions that were asked at the public forum. There's a lot of questions that weren't able to be addressed just during our time standpoint. Is to put together a frequently asked question list of things that we can answer from that night, and be able to just get a Infinite Campus blast out to all families just regarding, we have a videotape of that night. We have resources that were provided that night along with an FAQ sheet. So that's something that we're in progress putting together. So I would say that would be the next natural kind of information sharing that we would be able to provide.
And I guess I would just add to my last point, I'd be curious, or I'd be interested in ensuring that not just Tim Kenny at the high school, but our other 3 buildings, not necessarily adopt what I just proposed, but have some kind of or response in place that if there is a student who's being isolated, that
Right.
and it's easier at the elementary schools because they typically have, one
Sure.
lead teacher and then
Yep.
a couple others, but
Yeah, we'll be sure to
yeah.
pass that on. And they all have some protocols in place to be able to do that, similar forms and that type of thing as the investigations are handling and as bullying is kind of standardized as part of the reporting that we do. So.
And then do you think, is January reasonable to come back with pricing for a third-party analysis or whatever
Evaluation.
you want to call it, evaluation?
Yeah, I
That
think
was
so.
okay.
Yeah, I can. I'll touch base with Marta and see if we can just put some feelers out there. Certainly, again, we've got some contacts already, but yeah, we can take a look at that. And some of these, I'm just not sure exactly what that cost would be, but yeah, we can do that. And then I can reach out to the police chief also and just see what resources he has as part of that process too.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Is he like leaving?
No, just a short recess for Pablo.
Okay. Well, he didn't ask for a recess, so I'm gonna
Keep it going.
yeah, we're moving on to the action agendas. So I will take a motion to approve monitoring report for OE1.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Discussion? Questions?
So my question about this one is how we account for instances where we've been not in compliance that, from our perspective, were later resolved. Because those aren't reflected in this report. So, but if we know that at a certain time in the year we were not in compliance, then I guess the way that it's structured now, I guess my question is then how do we account for those things? So, for example, we knew that we were not in compliance with OE4 in May. We knew our organizational culture was not one that was good for our teachers because they were telling us that. And so I guess, the way this is written now, though, would just be based on the report we had, whatever was prior to that.
At the time.
At the time, we were in compliance, based on that survey or whatever. So, I'm not comfortable accepting the report unless we're either going to call out those exceptions or somehow, acknowledge. I guess, and maybe this is a question about CGs, so we need to hash it out. I guess I'm feeling the limitations of the reporting structure, I guess. Because if this is in the record and it basically says everything's been acceptable for the last year, and technically there were times when it wasn't, how do we reflect that, in a way that's accurate?
So I think the thing that we needed to do then was to, as a board, decide to vote on bringing it back, and change the report. So in May, we should have done that as a board, like voted to say, okay, I want to bring that back and change what we have as our final report.
Is the question because you approved it and said everything was okay, you had something in between and now we're coming to another one, we're approving it again, but whatever was out of compliant was not discussed?
Well, it
Those two
wasn't
reports.
reflected in those reports.
It was discussed, but it wasn't reflected in
That's
the
what I meant,
reports.
sorry.
Yeah. So I think, but we can, so there's two things. One is this is what we have in front of us now in terms of what we said what this was gonna be in terms of, right? The other part is whether or not we wanna change that in terms of, we can change what we wanna say in terms of like how we would actually measure those things, right? Like it wouldn't be just from, I think we have to think about how we wanna do it, right? Like, do we wanna have it as like addendums? Do we wanna have it as, let's like keep a log of like all of those and like points and places where we wanna change, like have different things in there? I mean, I think you just have to make a decision about how you wanna do that. At some point, you need to be able to, I guess from my perspective, is you still need to have a way to like look at all of them and say, where are we with all of them, right? And at one point in time, and then also, I mean, I think one option would be to say like we're gonna also keep track of points outside of that, right, where we wanna add information.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a decision that we can make. You know, it's not in here currently, is that? So the way we should have done it is bring it back.
And we should do that anytime we think we're out of compliance with
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we did do in those situations, as you said, was we talked about it, but we didn't actually like write it down.
It's not ever marked as non-compliant officially in a report.
Or
what
it
you're
might
saying?
be, but it's like, yeah, we'd have to get, I mean, like, this is too vague to like say that, like, you know, like you'd have to go in and check, but yeah.
Sure, I understand.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like, I feel like this is too, like, the way this is written is like, that's like a vague thing to say.
Mm.
That's my take on it. I don't know what you guys think.
But what's a vague thing to say?
It's just that it says it's like, it doesn't like give you an opportunity to say something very specific about a specific policy.
Right. Well, and I think that is, to Emily's point, a bit of a shortcoming in the
Yeah.
system, that if you're not actively doing that, in terms of efficiency though, I think my preference would be to add an addendum, because to your original point, if something has occurred but been resolved, right, are we monitoring that it happened in the first place or that it was resolved in a assumingly reasonable way?
Both.
Could be both, right, if it's not resolved in a reasonable way.
Right.
So I would think we would want to do, I guess my immediate opinion is to do an addendum of those situations and bring it back, because there's other reports that perhaps there are things that have happened in the middle of the reporting timeline, and how, you know, we're not gonna continually bring back the reports for some of those things.
And I think, I mean, when I was looking at this report, I was thinking of literally like 2 or 3 things, not every moment that,
Right.
things
Right.
weren't
Right.
perfect.
Right.
But, but significant things that.
That we can't forget about, that, yeah,
Right,
right.
and I think we talked maybe the last meeting about the potential for adding like board comments.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe this is an occasion where we do that, but I just wanted to kind of raise this issue because I, as you said, as a matter of efficiency, I feel like this is a pretty significant shortcoming with CG, where it's like any time we feel like we're out of compliance, we have to bring that report back, and we know that bringing the report back isn't just a matter of us discussing, but asking the administrator to come back and re-present, and there's a significant amount of work involved there. So,
But it's disingenuous of the system if we don't do that, right? Because
Yeah, I mean,
otherwise it's like, well,
the
that's,
fact that it's work isn't that's the point of
Sure.
it, right?
Right.
Like, it shouldn't be something, like you were just saying, that it was like, oh, well, it wasn't something that we were like, it's fine, right? Like, if it's something that we really want to see change, or we feel strongly about, then that's, I think, why, I mean, we did feel, I guess I will say this, I think we did feel that way about the things that happened, like that thing in May, for example, but at the time, like, I was thinking about solving that problem and not thinking about this necessarily. So I never said to you guys, like, hey, we should bring this back. So, I mean, I agree with that. I just think that if we don't, I mean, I feel like there's a way to, like, keep track of those things in a way that's, like, can still allow us to remember them. And I still think it makes sense to have, if it's something that we feel really strongly about, we should have it come back and all of us should debate it again.
Sure.
Right? So, but, okay, so two things. One, that's about making changes, which we can do, we can either, like, go back and look at those now, and not address this one now, or we can do it, I mean, or we can ask to have a second one sooner than later. So, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Or could we, to Emily's point, add our comments in as an addendum or in our notes, you know, the concerns that may exist? And if so, then we would probably have to meet in closed session for that.
I don't, no, we wouldn't.
No? Okay.
I mean, all these, yeah, no. I think we'd have to go back and look at the notes already in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, which we can do.
Yeah. And this goes to the same, you know, I guess the thinking about what I brought up last time about when we say compliant with exceptions, we need to call out those exceptions.
Yes.
I think we just need to own. So, I mean, if nothing else, for our own, to remind ourselves, like, this was an outstanding issue. So,
So for this situation, Emily, what's your preference?
I prefer to table it and you know,
Bring it back with those changes.
bring
Well,
it back
or with the addendums
With the addendum.
Yeah.
and the noted ones. Okay.
Noted exceptions. The other more minor thing for Kelly, much more minor, there's just, it says, under disposition of the board, it says it's OE3 instead of 1. This is a typo.
Okay.
So do we need to,
Should make a
We need
move.
So then I have to make a motion to table.
but we have a standing motion
Oh.
to accept it, so we have to
So we vote
vote
that
on that
down,
first.
Yeah.
Yes.
and
Okay.
then we.
Thank you. So, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? All, not in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then I will take a motion to table it.
So I move that we table and ask for an addendum noting the times when we were not in compliance with significant policy or
Second.
operating expectation.
Okay. So I will work with Brian on bringing this back in January.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a lot more specifics than that, as like what to bring back, which policies, and all of that. So,
So
we'll
I'll
have
just
to-
need to go through, and I can do this with, Kelly, look at go through the reports with her and write down the exceptions.
And there you have the email that I sent,
Yeah.
sort of asking about a couple.
Okay.
So, okay. So I have a motion and a second to, table this till January. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I will take a motion for monitoring report 2, emergency superintendent succession.
So move.
Second.
Okay, so, this is our new succession plan. Brian, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, so this is just in case I win the lottery and I'm out of here like the next day, that we can continue to function. I feel great and don't anticipate going anywhere, but so just a list of 5 people. I think last year we had talked about amendments, reducing that like down to 2 or 3, but that was we didn't bring that back as part of the reviews of these policies, and we haven't gotten to the OEs or to 1 or 2 at least to make any amendments. So I stuck with the 5, and just working through people that are most familiar with the system and in district level positions with Tim Joint, and then Tim Kenny, just with familiarity with the system and the community. So as the top 2.
And just to confirm, like an emergency basis means like you're snowed in. Like when you say no communication, right? Like we just, so it's not like you can't physically be here. It's more that we also can't be in contact.
Can't communicate at all. Yeah, correct.
You are
Yeah.
incapacitated.
Correct.
Or
Yes.
without cell service and.
Or
Which could also be, couldn't that be?
Correct.
yes. So unable to communicate and lead the system. This just gives some clear direction about who you would contact.
Okay. All right. Any other further questions about this? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And then Marta is going to talk about asset protection. So I will take a motion to approve the monitoring report for OE7.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So do you guys have any questions?
This is more of a clarifying question, perhaps, Brian. I'm particularly curious about, and I know I harp on this, but the cybersecurity insurance. And perhaps that's in our technology plan, but given the heavy usage of our systems, from students and Wi-Fi, and especially if in the technology plan we increase all of those things, what sort of cyber training or cyber management do we have for those systems? Is that a question better to ask for our technology plan versus the insurance component of it?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly touch base with Mickey. He'd probably be more knowledgeable on that. I don't know, Marta, if you.
We do have insurance coverage in case of cyber breach.
Is part of that requirement to ensure our systems and people are aware of security?
So this is
shortfalls?
not this is extra coverage the district purchased, just to make sure that in the event if something happens,
That
we
we
have
have
a
the
coverage
insurance
to be able
covered.
to recover.
I'll hold my questions for Mickey.
How do you determine, how do we determine how much we need? I'm just curious.
There's recommendations from insurance in terms of cyber security, wire transfers, things of that nature, and exposure for the school district.
Okay. And that's would that come from Chubb then, or
There-
companies like that?
Right, and from our agent.
I just had one question sort of related to board indicator 4 about the preventive maintenance system. So if I remember right, when we talked about budgeting for a new system, you'd said you were going to kind of look at and see how the budget sort of falls out and how spending is going. Can you remind me, are you like have you made that determination yet, or when would that be, like after the spring?
So we wanted to wait until spring to see how the winter is, and then see if we have enough money. This software costs approximately $30,000.
Okay.
We're still doing the preventive maintenance, but I think we can do more if we have all the information in the system.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay. Go ahead.
Nope, she got my question.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just go through my notes, make sure I'm putting it
Yeah. Okay. Pablo.
Keep going. I'm looking for some notes here.
I think I asked.
I think we're waiting on you, if you have any.
Yeah.
Make something up.
I don't do that. People want to get home. Yeah, so I guess in terms of, and this might fall under something else, but in terms of the continued reduced support for special education that we talked about this morning, and Superintendent, the DPI state superintendent's going to be requesting the 60% in her next budget. What kind of impacts has the continued reduced support for special ed from the state had on our budget?
So,
Okay, wait, so
Wait, is that
that's
the-
not
That's why I
about
said
this.
this would. Okay.
You can, I think, ask her that
Can you
at the
hold that?
when we get to
All right.
budgeting.
I got excited when I saw her there.
Okay. She'll be
That's
back.
under board governance.
She'll be back.
I
I
wanna
was
talk
like, wait,
budget.
I was wondering what that had to do with our assets.
Yeah.
So no
Nope.
questions.
No
on OE.
questions.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Martha. Now you know what to
Thank you.
expect for your next question. All right, and then we have one thing on our consent agenda. I'll take a motion.
So move.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Shorewood Athletics Booster Club for the $10,000 donation. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Are you guys gonna go down there? New weight room?
Think about it.
Maybe.
Okay, opportunity for public comment, number 2. Please state
Janet
your name and
Freiline.
address. Oh, thanks.
2016 East Menlo Boulevard. So, just some further things to consider with respect to the safety issues. So, I'm searching for my story. So there was a very nice article in USA Today about an averted act of violence in a New York village. I don't know how many of you picked up on that. But some of the fallout from that is, I think, very similar to what we've experienced here. And I was encouraged and pleased to have an opportunity for the community to discuss this in the community sessions and to have the panel there to speak, because some of the things that were in this article is some commentary about the Violence Project. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a project that tracks not only incidences of violence, but averted incidences of violence, and tries to, with the support of law enforcement as well as funding from the Department of Justice, tries to identify items or characteristics, patterns, so to speak, that that to create a portrait of things that we should be maybe looking at. And in many of, not all of these cases, many of the factors that are discussed in this article are items that we are already addressing or in the process of addressing. So that was very heartening to me in terms of the stuff that is being done, to really recognize that it's the work that we do in the school in terms of understanding how our kids are struggling that can really keep all of our kids safe. So I'm happy to share that with you. I will forward it to the school board message. I had another comment on a different subject, but it's sort of run away from me, so I will yield.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jen.
Whoops, my phone's ringing. That's not supposed to happen. Hi, Sarah McEnany, 2616 East Jarvis Street. Brian, in terms of how you were talking about summarizing the community conversation and then FAQ, and then listening to this conversation tonight, I think it'd be really helpful to also not only address the questions that were answered or asked that night, but also go back into all the things that you've discussed regarding security. For instance, I think a lot of people don't know we received a $100,000 grant. I think if you go on to the district website, you can start piecing it together, or you're in these conversations. But I think community members and parents aren't aware of the amount of depth of work that has been done, and we can't, sadly, avert this trauma. And like in Waukesha, I'm sure students are leaving their district. I think this trauma is, horrible. But if you look at the Partners in School Safety from the Department of Justice, the key points are building a comprehensive mental health structure. I think in the FAQ, there's the article in Shorewood today. It needs to be there that we have counselors, how that happened. We need to shape a school climate that reduces violence. The discussion has been had about how that is happening in the classrooms with the different kind of programming. But if you're not in these conversations, you won't know about it. Hardening physical buildings. We have the referendum, $9.2 million that's going into school security, plus the $100,000 that was a safety grant. Creating routine safety controls, describing ALEC. Construct a strong relationship with first responders. Discuss that you actually do have these conversations. Discuss that no, you don't get to see the district safety management plan and why. There's a reason for that. And then there's, if you go to Every Town for Safety, there's implement expert endorsed school security upgrades. It's going to be the experts, which are your third-party evaluators and or your police. I would like to think parents were the experts, but they aren't in this case. So I think that, there's so many gaps in the community's understanding, which you as a school board, or as you were talking about, Clark, it was new to you that you couldn't share information and why, and once people understood, it was either confidentiality laws. Police can speak a little more about students than the district. But I think there's a whole education process that has to go on to creating possibly more trust. Ultimately, as much trust as you build, we can't stop these incidences. I mean, my son told me 3 years ago he went to school every day knowing he could get plowed down. To think that the school board or the police department or, we can only strategize. Working together on the local, state, and federal level for changing gun laws would be very, very helpful. But I think addressing what we're doing locally in our school district with the police department will help with this dilemma. So that's all I have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lynette, what do you want? You need address?
Just name and
Right,
address.
name and address. Lynette Brackman, 4050 North Downer. So I wanted to, first of all, I wasn't planning on speaking about this, but it's come up, and I just wanted to say that before I left, I had presented some things on ALICE training to the board, and what it was for it was for a program that because we already do ALICE training, and it was a thing that the teachers would do over their computers, and in addition to what they are already doing, and I felt that was important. And with the things that you guys brought up tonight, the thing that we're missing by not doing that with them is it gives them resources, like where they can go in and ask questions, because within our district we have kindergartner, K4, all the way to a 12th grader, and the teachers would be able to go in there and kind of get information, and I'm not super familiar with it. It was a long time ago, but I know that one of the big things was it had information and resources for the teachers to go in and learn how to do the ALICE training and explain it to age appropriately to their children. And so if we're talking about that, that's something that we're already doing, and we could add it. It wasn't, I could send you guys the information. It wasn't a huge expense at all, and it wasn't a big commitment for the teachers. It was not long. And so but I think even though it wasn't a huge time commitment for them, it's just the fact that they would have all those resources right at their hands. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And then the other part of that is when I sent you all a beautiful plan, a safety plan from Madison, and I hope that you will take a look at that. And that's a safety plan that they put together for their district, and they made it public, and they understood that there are things in it that are not, that are sensitive and shouldn't be out there, and they were able to take those things and still give their district a very, very good idea of how things are run, how it works. All the questions that you asked are in that safety plan, and that's why I sent it to you, and that is why I had been trying to get my eyes on our safety plan for over a month. Everything that you're asking should be in there. So that's, I hope that you guys will take the time and look at it and compare it to ours. The only question about that I have is I cannot find where it was approved by the board. And I've asked for some help from people on the board, and they haven't been able to. But since it's, you're the president, Prue, I don't know if you could find that or tell me what the date was or where it was downloaded into board books, because that's, our safety plan would have had to have been approved by the board. And in 2017, we passed a law that said all schools have to have a safety plan. So if you could get back to me on when it was approved, I'd appreciate it, because I haven't been able to find it. And then that brings me to what I was originally asking. I wanted to know about our safety grant. The safety grant we received from the information I was able to find. We spent $188,000 of the safety grant on cameras, and $32,000 went to some training and I think some protective film. And that was another thing that that information was on there, but I wanted to understand how we decided that was our best choice, the best way to, with the list given. And that takes me to the next document I sent you. It's, both of them are on there. There was 2 rounds. There was round 1 of the grant, and then there was round 2. So I sent that to you, and I'm not expecting you to read the whole thing, but if you just kind of look at the list of the items that we could choose from, I thought that was interesting. And I'm kind of wondering how we got to the point where we were okay, we're spending all of our money on cameras. I think that I can understand that there are some areas and some, in the elementary schools where, we have a point of entrance and those need to be working very well. I'm just wondering about how that was, how it was decided, who decided it. And so if that's I don't know, Brian, if you can answer that now. Is that something that you can?
I didn't get your email till we started our meeting, so I haven't had a chance to look at it. So I can look at it and get back to you.
Okay. So, okay. So if you can let me know, I'd like to understand that better, because the list of things are, there's a lot on it. and then other part of that document, it lists the things that we were supposed to have in place or have done in order to, we have made the grants, we've received the money, and we've spent it. There's a list on there of things that we were supposed to have done, and one of the things is all of our doors are supposed to be locked on our buildings. It's part of, it's like if we sign this paperwork, say we're accepting the money, I guess I want to understand it, and that would be on the paperwork for the actual grant that was signed. It would probably say how we got around that, because I understand that we have public coming into the building here and the pool. We have 2 more buildings that we don't have public coming in, and I'm wondering why we've chosen to continue to leave them unlocked. It states very clearly on there that that's what their expectations are, that we lock all of our doors on all of our schools. That is not the case here. So I'm kind of wondering, so that would be something that should be on that form, but and maybe they did say that we couldn't do it for the main building, but we do have some that's not the case. So I'm questioning that, and I also, just want you guys to, it's a lot, and I'm sure that it's not something that when I started asking these questions, I never even realized what was all, out there and how much it entailed, and I know it's a lot for you guys, but if you just look at the list of the things that, I think that hopefully it'll make you maybe ask questions, and because there's, some of the stuff doesn't make clear sense to me, and so I'd like some clarification, and I have also talked to, Brian, his friend is, I actually called him because I was asking him how does this work? What do we do? And so I do hope that you guys will be open to that, and the person who would come into the district and say, this is where we're lacking and this is what we could do and stuff.
I was like,
he was,
what? I
he was,
was
I'm sorry, he
was
was someone on someone referred me to him, and I ended up talking to him, and he actually knew Brian and used to work with him, and so he that's what they do, and they're like a nonprofit, and they come in, and again, I don't know what about how many people do that and stuff, but that he had a lot to say, and was, I hope that's something that you guys will look into. I think that it's needed. I think that the fact that a lot of the questions that I asked, and the reason I'm even looking for a safety plan, is because I wasn't getting answers to the questions. And if they were in the safety plan, I feel like they would have been easily available to people who worked on it, and that didn't seem to happen. And so, I hope that that document I sent you, I hope that helps. I hope that helps for you guys to understand what I'm looking for and what it looks like, what it's supposed to look like, because I don't believe that's what ours. I don't think that's what's all in ours. So, so if you could, I don't know if so then do you guys just get? Is there some time that we'd ever have a committee or something back? Because we had those in the past. Is that anything that we are thinking about or could think about in the future?
A committee for
safety?
For safety, for anything.
I mean, well, let me get back to answering these questions
Okay.
and reading your email, and then I think if we were to have a committee on safety, it would be to do something, like to have a particular goal or outcome that we were looking for. So, I mean, the board would have to decide if we wanted to do that.
Okay, so you do you guys even have committees within this, within?
There's a safety work group in the district. Is that what you're wondering about? Like of district employees?
Right, and how often do they? Because the link that I found there it didn't seem like they had met any,
Is that quarterly?
Is that still is that still a
I'd
thing?
have to go back and look.
I can send that to you as well.
Okay, but that you have there's no plan in the future for that to be something that you'd go back
For a
to
board
having.
committee?
It
No?
hasn't.
No.
We can bring it up. We can discuss it.
Okay, thank you.
Just for
Thanks.
everybody
Thank
that's like the document she sent, it's on the top of page 7. There's the requirement, like applicants have to certify that their entrances are locked during the school day. So I think what she was
Which
asking
we were
is
not
if-
eligible for that funding.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that, yeah, I think that was
We
the
knew that
question
we
we
weren't
had.
But
Okay.
Brian, I think to Lynette's point and Sarah's point, I think all those documents that are in board books need to be summarized in terms of the grants, because just looking quickly at what she sent, that it does state that we were not eligible for the full grant money because of the way that our building,
Laid out.
the high school is laid out, and we're not able to lock our doors all day long. So I think to Sarah's point, to summarize some of those previous actions and what we did get would be helpful.
Amy Miller, 4458 North Larkin, but actually I live at 1600 East Lake Bluff Boulevard. I am a 5th and 6th grade teacher at Lake Bluff and the SEA president. And I sit before you tonight to implore you to ensure that the staff have the same communication around safety that parents and families have. I can tell you that January 13th is the next time the safety committee will meet. Each building has a representative on that safety committee, and we talked about it tonight at our faculty meeting, and our representative is seeking input from teachers to say, what questions do you have? But we have to make sure that kind of those FAQs and the information that is going to be shared with families is also shared with us. We are only as good as the information we have. We need to have that information too. So Mr. Kenny sat up here and talked about the administrative team and their conversations, but I want to ensure that we are equally interested and need that same information too. So
Amy, are those building representatives teachers?
I only can answer for my building, and I can tell you, yes.
Yes, that's what Lake Bluffs is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So in our building, it's Cheryl Soddy. And it was an opt-in, and their goal was to have at least one teacher from each building. I don't know how it ended up, but. And they have met. Cheryl does a really nice job of sharing, here's the information that's come up. I think that they meet every other month, but based on her reports out to the staff, but I'm not sure about that.
Thank you. Sure.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Jessica Carpenter, 4360 North Alpine Avenue. I just wanted to connect and in this sort of lived experience, we've all obviously learned a lot. And as a village board member, there are members of our board who had no idea that this happened, had no idea about the meeting that happened a few weeks ago. And I hope, and my purpose of speaking tonight is that we have some way to inform members who are not in Infinite Campus, including our village manager, about crises as soon as they're happening. You know, we are not looking for additional confidential information about any of the students, but just the knowledge that this has happened, because they're a few steps behind everybody else. And also kind of to continue the communication dialogue, our meetings are the first and third Mondays of every single month. This communication meeting, the panel meeting was scheduled for a village board meeting at the same exact time. I reached out to Peru and I reached out to Brian Davis to see what our options were to readjust that time frame. I felt it was really important that the village board be there to really just present to our community that we support what's going on and support this crisis. And we had no opportunity to change, unfortunately, our board meeting based on the notification that was needed to the public. And so I just really ask that we work together to make sure that our community understands that we are in this together. We can't schedule meetings on the first and third Monday of the month at the same exact time. That's really important. As a parent, I wanted to be there, and I was and had to leave and couldn't stay for the entire meeting. So, I'd like for us to work together so that we can not schedule meetings at the same exact time as village board members. So,
Thank you. I wanted to let you know that Brian and I met with Rebecca and Allison, and Rebecca is now getting every district communication now as like a part of an IC blast. So
Sure.
so she will be the one who would be distributing it to the rest of the board.
Okay, great.
So I just wanted to let you know that we talked about that
Okay,
piece.
great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Frank Cumberbatch, 4146 North Newhall. Just, I have a couple of questions. They're quick answers. Do we have weapons in this school during the school day? None. No adult is trained to use a weapon in this school district.
No.
Not a single one. So if we have an incident in this school, we wait till the police officer gets here. Nobody is trained to use a weapon. Okay. All right. We'll deal with that different time. Just sitting in the back of the room, I'm wondering if this conversation, to pick up on what the lady just said, this conversation is so big, I wonder if it's bigger than this body. And should we not have a village conversation versus a district conversation? My mother-in-law in the 70s did a survey in this village. And it was amazing what she found, the amount of weapons that people have in their homes in the 70s. We don't know how we feel about guns in this village, really. And I'm wondering if this topic is bigger than just the school. The kids leave home and they come to school. Final question. Mr. Stillmarker, how do you feel about, you don't need to mention names or anything. How do you feel, if this conversation has any bearing on how things go here, about how the student body responded to the incident? How did the grown-ups interact with you and your colleagues over this incident?
I think when the incident happened, as a student, it was just kind of like, let's get there and let's just kind of move on from it and let's just get back to work. And I think that kind of some people wanted to talk about it, some people didn't. So I think that the teachers were really good with that and kind of like, if you want to talk about it, hey, we can talk about it. If you don't want to talk, we don't want to talk about it. So I think, like, from my perspective and just talking with a lot of people, it popped up really talking more about what actually happened a couple days after, but the day right after, it was really just kind of like, let's move on, let's get back to school, let's get back to work, let's just get the ball rolling. Because it was just kind of something that people didn't want to talk about right away and kind of just wanted to go back and get more comfortable and just get back into the routine. So I think that it was a mix of both because sometimes, people wanted to say something, but there are also times, and I think that this happened for a little bit, where people just didn't want to even hear about it.
Ms. Cumberbatch, are you satisfied with representing your student body here, that the
All right.
interaction
Are you just here to
between-
like harass her?
Oh, no, I'm curious. If you're satisfied as a representative of the student body on the, how this conversation went, you feel that it represents quite well how your colleagues feel about how things. I'm just curious, and the reason why I'm curious, let me just say it in all seriousness. The conversation just now went on between the adults, and the two representing the greater percentage of the student body. The ratio of children to adults is what in this institution? 5 to 1, 10 to 1?
Mm-hmm.
And this conversation for an hour went on between you. And these two were not included other than the Alice comments. And you talk about bias. The bias is between you and them, not with Mr. Coleman, between black people and white people. So I just want to make that observation. You can answer this question if you want.
Unsatisfied.
Jason Rosenberg, 2640 East Newton Avenue. As a parent of a child that was on the hit list, I would say that the communication, the response was less than adequate. And I think that the communication starts from the top. And when 70% of the time in this meeting, the superintendent's looking down at his paper and not looking up, the meta message that that sends is very poor. Communication starts from the top. And I'm extremely dissatisfied with it. Looking back, the best communication I've seen you do, Mr. Davis, Dr. Davis, is when you didn't get the job as superintendent at Sun Prairie. You were very explicit about why you didn't get that job. The information that should be coming from the top should be from you to the parents. You absolutely should respect the privacy of the child that put forth that hit list. But there's so much irony in the amount of communication that you're unable to give to the community. Your grandfather told you that you have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth, and you said that. I feel that you're not using your 2 ears and your 2 eyes enough. 6 months after Michael Brown was shot in St. Louis, you were one of 2 finalists for the superintendent in that area. How would people have responded with your communication in this community if you did that in Ferguson? How would people have responded with you painting over that mural? How would people respond when you bungled the response to the To Kill a Mockingbird? How would people have responded? And why is it okay here? Because I know how people would respond in Ferguson. I'm jumping ahead because we're going to get to 8C here in a little bit, but I'm extremely dissatisfied in response. I can go through the minutia of what everyone talked about here in terms of safety and that type of things. I could talk about the millions of dollars that are going to be spent on locks. Why aren't we spending that on the children and their emotional response to this? When my child went back to school, we'll have a few days and then we'll get back into it. I have another child in 6th grade. How did she think about her sister being on a list to be murdered? When I was in my clinic seeing patients, and I got an email at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when this event happened in the morning, and I looked at it, and it wasn't personal at that point, and then went back, and then I had a voice message from Mr. Kenny. How do you think I felt about that? What was the crisis response? There is no crisis response. When you have an equity director get up and read a poem and change wordage in the poem, and that person's not immediately fired for that, and you have no response to that, how is that leadership from the top? How are the teachers that are coming up here that just told you there's no communication within any of the different schools? I've heard from St. Robert's, it's right there, there's no communication with them. You're getting a vote of no confidence from the parents. You're getting a vote of no confidence from many teachers. And I assume you're getting a vote of no confidence from some of the board members. I think the question is going to come up, should we continue with Dr. Davis's employment here as superintendent? But my question is, why would you? Why would you when you have so many people that are so dissatisfied with your crisis response, with your communication in general, with your background, I think you can do better. But I'm not willing to take that chance anymore. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. There'll still be one more opportunity for public comment. So,
I think somebody was trying to come up.
oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't see you.
Miguel Salas, 2647 East Beverly. There's a pattern of commentary here about the lack of communication, and I want to echo that specifically from you, Dr. Davis. And it's a pattern that goes back years in terms of how you deal with community stakeholders. It starts with painting over the mural. You know you should have handled that differently. Then you knew you should have handled differently the Mockingbird play. How many more times do you have to apologize? It's unacceptable. Your communication is unacceptable. This isn't a massive school district. We should be able to hear from you. We should be able to hear your urgency. And what you say can't be just about bland statements that mean nothing. That's how your statements come off. And in terms of the instructional piece, you have a crisis at the Shorewood Middle School, in my opinion, on this math piece. Where's the urgency on that? On those test scores? You have personnel problems. Where's the urgency on fixing those? We have a ton of resources, a lot of wealth here. No urgency from you on that. Unacceptable.
Any other comments? Oh, okay, sorry.
I'll keep this short, but since we're going there, I have a freshman at SHS.
Can you, sorry, state your name
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
address.
I'm Molly Boutel, 4485 North Frederick. I have a freshman at SHS also on the hit list. So I'm closer to this incident than I ever would like to have been. Just a couple of things that have come up. I've certainly noticed that I do believe there is a pattern to a lot of the commentary here, almost as if, you know, I'm not sure where everyone is coming from entirely. I'm glad that the school district held its meeting as soon as possible after the incident, because it told me that the issue was being taken seriously. And I really don't think it's appropriate for another political body or members of another political body to tell the board or the district how it should conduct its response in that way. I'm not sure that any more time would have been appropriate in that case. I wanted to hear from the district, and I felt that you know, while obviously I have questions that remain unanswered, I'm not sure that those questions are for the district to answer for me, right? It's a legal issue in any case. So for me to hear from the district and hear that, and hear from the police chief and whatnot right away it was really important. And so I just want to, I'm only jumping up in here because it seems like there's a huge beat down unit going on. I could not have sent my son back to school if I didn't have faith in, some faith in our police department to conduct an investigation, and some faith in our school district to apply the resources and knowledge that I do not have in the moments when this happened, right? So I believe me, when we got the call in our house on Tuesday night, I had a ton of questions. I didn't know if I would ever send my son back to school, right? I was calling when we got the robocall on Wednesday morning. It was like, what, 4:35 in the morning? I hadn't slept. I was calling my son in. I didn't know what was going on. I had a lot of questions too. But I guess what I want to say is not just to be like, hey, go you, because obviously there are things to learn from every situation. This is a particularly unusual situation because it was extremely serious. As the speaker earlier mentioned, for those of us with kids on the hit list, this is a reality that we have to kind of deal with every day, thinking like somebody wanted to actually murder my child. Somebody wanted to murder my child. There's no getting around it. And the presence of ammunition and whatnot made it extremely serious. And at the same time, nothing happened, right? So I understand that there's like in how do we go forward, or what are our expectations as a community from the school district in terms of its response? Obviously, there are different expectations, but what I'm saying is, I caution you to hopefully in the coming weeks and months and hours and minutes to keep a level head in the face of a lot of emotional response, my own included, because I do need to maintain that faith, right? And I'm not sure that running a superintendent out of town every few years is the answer to every time we have a situation or a crisis or something that we have a concern about. So I have a lot more to say, but I just felt it important to jump in now.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Miller, 3861 North Morris. I am just trying to contain my emotion. I'm not going to keep beating down what's already been going on, but the utter lack of communication between this board and the way you govern this board with this community has to be changed. And I would like to take a vote with our community to ask them how they feel about this mode of governance, because it's not working. It doesn't work. I had the luxury of knowing what happened at 10 o'clock the morning of Tuesday the 13th. I also have the luxury of exposing my daughter, because she gave me her permission, to let this community know that she turned in her friend. This is a kid, and I won't say who that is, who has been a part of our district since kindergarten. When I go to a sporting event, I can pick out the kid who's isolated or sitting alone. When I sit in a classroom observing my kids, I can see the kid who is ostracized. I don't even know these kids. The teachers do. And guess what happens when they try to intervene or step in on the bullies? The bullies are sent to the office, and they're sent back for this restorative justice circle. Seriously, have either of you ever sat in a restorative justice circle or observed it?
I have not.
Well, you're good kids, thank you. It's sort of a joke. We go through the motions. These are kids. They're going to go back to the same group mentality that they were in the day before, and that's what's happening. I've been in this district, or had a kid in school for 17 years now. I was a room parent for 14 of those years. I could see it. I could see what kids were being bullied, including my own son. I came to this board, in fact, before coherence governance, in a complete debacle of a meeting where the media was here. I asked for help. I went through the channels of, protocol, who to go to first, second, and third, and nothing happened. And it came to speaking at a school board meeting before I was labeled the loudmouth. And, you know, walk around Stephanie, because don't get her mad. She's going to be loud. Shortly thereafter, coherence governance. I came to you, Brian, when you first started. I had a meeting with you, and then I had a meeting at Atwater with you. And you assured me that the bullies were going to be serving the consequences. And very quickly, that was proven wrong. They're not. And we're watching bullies get away with tormenting kids. And then these kids take this beating, and it's not bullying like it was when we were young. We would go home, most of us, to the safety of our own houses and at least have that time with our families to not be tormented. That's not what it is anymore. These kids go home and they're 24/7 on social media and Instagram and everything else, and they're getting hammered left and right every day, all night. It's only a matter of time before another kid snaps. And I'm pretty sure if you put out a questionnaire to the teachers in all of the schools, they could give you a list of about 20 kids each they probably might be struggling. Is it so hard to ask us to intervene and step in and take a look at who these kids are? I think another point to your communication, Pablo, with identifying teachers who have a connection to a student. Do you realize that the Lake Bluff teachers don't know most of the Atwater teachers? And the elementary schools don't know most of the SIS teachers? There's a couple teachers at 6th grade who know the 9th grade teacher or 7th grade teachers and the 8th to the 9th grade teachers. But as a collective, our community of teachers don't know each other. So when you take somebody, you're talking about these transition points, and we take a kid out of elementary school and we put him at SIS, and they have no sense of belonging. They're there for 2 years, sometimes not enough time to connect with a teacher, but they've had 5-6 years at Lake Bluff. Why aren't the Lake Bluff teachers communicating with the SIS teachers for these kids who potentially could be at risk? And why aren't the SIS teachers that have connections with students at risk talking to the high schoolers? And why aren't the counselors? I mean, I get the high school, we should just call them career counselors, because it's not happening in a traditional counseling level. And I appreciate the fact that we're now partnering with actual psychologists. But my daughter asked me to advocate for her friend tonight. And I understand, because I have many friends out here, and the kids on that hit list, and I'm happy to answer questions. A very large chunk of those kids bullied this kid. It just was. And that kid's verbatim quote to my daughter was, "Some of these kids make my everyday life a living hell." And that's what he said to my daughter. And my daughter begged him to go to the counselor with her. He knew it was her that turned him in. She begged him to go with, and then he ultimately said, "You do what you have to do." He was asking for help. He knew she would do the right thing. He was asking for help. And we didn't help him. Hopefully he's getting that help now. But I hope to God that we don't just cast a 14-year-old boy off. And I understand the initial rage of, or in fear and sadness of, having your kid's name on that list. Mine wasn't, so I'm not even gonna pretend to understand that. But there are so many dropped balls along the way with one person, and I hope it doesn't happen again. That's it.
Paul DK, 3813 North Newhall Street. I have a fresh person at SIS. SHS now. I was going to say some witty, well-researched shit about locking the damn doors and then pound the table and leave. And they should be locked, right? And we can lock them and still have an open campus. But I want to give an actual piece of solid advice to Brian, because there is a lot of hate. You're late, man. You need to answer those. You need to make that FAQ, and you need to answer them now. You need to answer them tomorrow or the next day. There are so many good questions that we all have, and we asked, and they weren't answered, and it's been a month. Answer the damn questions. You owe it to the people behind me, and you owe it to them. That's it.
Just to follow the last speaker, Kelly Salas, 2647 East Beverly. And I want to speak later this evening on a different issue, on the math issue. But just to follow that last speaker, in terms of the communication on this issue and my experience of the silence that I experienced and the fear and the embarrassment of telling my daughter that I didn't know whether the student was going to be coming back to school and that she should text me if he was back in school so that I would know what was happening. So, Brian, earlier this evening, I believe it was you or maybe it was Tim Kenny that said, I can assure the community that we've done everything we can. We needed that message like last Thursday. The community knew that this expulsion hearing happened. It's publicly noticed, it's out there, the community knows that it's happening. You have to say something. You can't leave us here in the dark. Thank you.
Kelly, I just want to address that. We actually can't say anything about the expulsion hearing.
You don't have to say anything about the expulsion hearing. You can say on Thursday what Brian said tonight, which is, I can assure the community that
Okay.
we've done everything we can. That could have been said last Thursday. That could have been said,
Yeah. 2 Thursdays
weeks
ago.
ago
Yeah.
and said, we can assure the community that we will do everything we can.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anjum Alden, 4509 North Larkin Street. My son was on the hit list too, and I have been extremely pleased with how the school handled the whole situation. I got a phone call from the principal within an hour of, like when the email came out, I got a phone call straight away. The counselor checked in with me and with my kid and has done subsequent check-ins this whole time. My kid is like, Mom, I don't want to talk about it. There's so many people to talk to about it, but I don't want to talk about it, which is an amazing problem to have. So I have been nothing but pleased with how the school has handled the way that we were treated, the way that my son was treated. I feel like Brian Davis is everyone's favorite scapegoat. The toilets are broken, blame Brian Davis. The school is messed up, blame Brian Davis. It takes a community and collaboration to make things happen. It frustrates me that every time there's a crisis in this community, everybody starts bashing the leadership. It doesn't solve any problems. Getting rid of Brian Davis right now would be the biggest mistake we could make because it would be the most destabilizing thing that could happen to this community. We have to learn how to collaborate and work together. And when we're angry and we feel rage about the helplessness of this whole situation, we have to learn how to come together, to listen to each other, to collectively work on solutions and problem solve, and to not go around blaming and saying awful things to people, people who are extremely dedicated to our students, people who go out of their way. I see them at all the school events. I see them helping wherever they can. Every single school board member here represents the community at every single school event that I've been to. I know that I could walk into Brian Davis's office anytime and speak to him. I know that I could email any single school board member, and if I wanted an answer or a meeting, I would get one right away. So I really wish, we are all very intelligent people. I wish that we could find a way when a crisis happens in the community to understand that nobody has answers, that there aren't always answers available at that moment, but we can work together and learn lessons and then move forward without all this bashing. It's not constructive. It doesn't help anything. If anything, it makes good people leave our district. Thank you. And just one more thing. This hit list thing of kids on the hit list being being bullies, that is just, it's extremely offensive because my kid barely knew the kid on the hit list. I mean, my kid barely knew the kid.
I said to this crowd only what this young man said to my daughter, and it wasn't everybody. As I said to the board, it wasn't everybody.
I'm David Ament, 4400 North Wildwood Avenue. Actually, the gentleman who spoke about SIS, I've had, now this is my 4th year in a row at SIS, so I have some experience there with both a boy and a girl, with kids who are vastly different in their temperaments, and in every way, really. And the last SIS newsletter that we were sent, this memo, Shifting Expectations, a Systemic Change in School Culture, which was talking about traditionally like having rules, clear rules and consequences that are very clear, having an actual a real structure for kids to understand behavior and expectations, versus a restorative approach, which is about relationships and mentions empathy numerous times. And so I just Googled, development of empathy during adolescence. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal summarizing some research that there's a tremendous amount of brain development going on during adolescence, similar to babyhood or toddlerhood even. And that for boys, there have been psychological studies showing that the ability to empathize in young adolescents between like 12 and 14 actually decreases. And I don't know if some of you have boys and who have gone through this, but there's quite a change. And this lovely little sweet boy that you had suddenly is a totally different animal. Okay, and there's psychological research on this issue. So their ability to empathize decreases, and then it's about 15 starts to begin to grow again. So to be changing the way that we are dealing with disruptive behavior and conflict by expecting people to learn empathy when they are developmentally at a stage where this is something that is just not connecting with them, I think it's part of what some of the issues are, particularly with boys, with the gender gap in the scores, with situations of bullying. And look, this kid had been in school a couple of months. We're basically talking, this is a problem that graduated from SIS to the high school. So I know we have psychologists at the schools. We have help from Children's Hospital. I would really urge that we look at some of the research and try to modify and tailor our approaches to the school culture, not to our ideal of how we want kids to be, but to the intense pressures, the importance of peer relationships. It's just a very unique and different time of life. And to say, okay, we're going to sit you down and we'll talk to you about being empathetic, I'm not sure that is the most effective approach. I think an approach of having a very clear structure of rules that kids understand exactly what they are, having a code of conduct that is not every single behavior could be anything from sitting out lunch detention to being expelled. Almost every behavior has this huge range. So they're really telling kids, well, you could do a whole bunch of things and anything could happen. That's not clear. It needs to be structured. It needs to be clear. It needs to be consistent. I think that for, especially for the boys, and I don't mean to be sexist, but I think is a much more effective way of getting the types of behavior, minimizing disruption, which then leads to an environment of learning, which is, I think what we're all after.
Thanks. All right, do we need to take a break?
I took one.
What?
I'm good.
You're fine? Okay.
Do you want to? 5 minutes?
No, are you
3
guys
minutes?
okay? I'm good.
Okay.
Okay. Board governance. So the only linkage meeting update, I have 2 linkage meeting updates, is we have our last linkage meeting this Thursday. Parents, students of color, parents of color, alum of color at 6 o'clock here at the high school. And I think the plan then is to, for all the meetings that happened between, in the last, at the last meetings, we'll come back and give the minutes in January and talk about our next plans. Because I haven't seen, I guess, the minutes from the ones that happened last week. Okay. So that's my only update on that. And then, Pablo, do you have a SWASA update?
Sure. So this morning at 7:30, Marta and I attended the Southeastern Wisconsin Schools Alliance monthly meeting in the Elmbrook schools with partners from all across Southeastern Wisconsin, school board members and superintendents. It started with a huge round of applause for our friends in Menominee Falls who took on a very controversial issue. You may have heard in the news the last 24 hours, and they voted to change their mascot. So we passed a resolution back in the summer. We joined on with several other districts. We were one of the first to ask for the 30-some schools that still have a Native American mascot in the state to get rid of them. So then Menominee Falls voted last night, and they had a very tense meeting, which you could,
Without referendum.
without going to a referendum, the board did, and they had a pretty contentious meeting last night, and they were greeted with a warm round of applause this morning. I don't know that they get that back in their community, but they did this morning. We got a typical legislative update, bill trackers. There's a link to everything from student records things that the governor vetoed to an ALEC bill around cursive writing, which is kind of stagnant right now. I guess the big thing to add, we have a meeting with the DPI state superintendent on January 7th. It might be a fun meeting for some people to go to if you haven't been to a SWASA meeting yet. It's going to be Tuesday, January 7th, 7:30 in the morning. State superintendent will be there. Then we had a research study synopsis shared with us from a professor from UW-Madison to understand how local community members value their public schools, interact with their public schools, and support their public schools. And he went from the national level discourse with, Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, who's a huge market-based reform advocate, school choice, to state level. What's happened here is more money for vouchers, more money for choice schools, and wanted to see how this played out locally, and found out things that I guess weren't terribly enlightening, but it's nice to have a research study behind it to back it up. But the importance of practicing advocacy, relationships to legislators, big thing, really connecting among districts, particularly rural and urban, and making sure we build those alliances, which is one of the things that SWASA and a lot of our networking has done. That's it. Marta, I don't know if you want to add anything. Yeah. All right. So that was SWASA this morning.
Okay. So the 7th is when what's the state superintendent coming to speak about?
Questions that we have.
So just kind of answering
so
questions.
it's basically going to be a sit down with the SWASA, with the alliance, and there's probably 25 of us that meet regularly. About
Districts.
25 districts, but
Yeah.
25 individuals that go to these meetings, you know, usually a superintendent from each district accompanied by a board member. But we're welcome to have, you know, there's business managers that go and other board members can attend as well. So even though I'm the representative, it would be great if all or more of you, we would just have to, you know, post it. But
okay.
Be an opportunity to meet the state superintendent and hear things beyond. One of the things I really appreciate about attending SWASA and being involved in educational issues outside of Shorewood is getting that broader perspective and seeing things outside of this awesome 1 square mile, but it's helpful.
Okay. And then you also went to the equity with Clark, the equity in the classroom workshop.
Yeah. So Clark and I had a good time.
We did.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to share some stuff, or
yeah, I
I've
can
got
share just
plenty
for-
of notes that I can share with
My
Kelly as well.
perspective's a little different. So the equity in the classroom workshop was geared towards educators in post-secondary high school environments. 2-year to 4-year schools, I think, were all included, and the focus was there were 2 keynote speakers, and the focus was how do we encourage that? What kind of teaching methods can we employ? They had Mr. Running Horse, I can't remember his first name. He was talking about how what he's a consultant for
Running Horse is his first name. Livingston.
Oh,
is
it's
his
a
last
Livingston.
name.
Sorry.
Livingston's the last name.
And then he was talking about K through 12 perspective. So while I felt like at first I was out of my element a little bit, it was nice because my first thought went to, well, wait a second, if they're struggling with these things coming in as new students from a post-secondary education, what are we doing that's contributing to that? And then so I started thinking about, well, we got to figure out how to make that connection to a lot of the work that we are doing, that we're trying to do, and that we need to do, including the strategic framework work. So at first I thought I was going to be a little bit lost, but the reason I went was because I wanted to catch up on some of these things, being new to the whole situation. So I was glad I went, and it was very applicable to what we're doing, because it makes it just, like I said, it's shown a light on, if they're struggling with it at this level, then we're the ones preparing, we're trying to get our kids from K through 12 prepared for that level. And they're dealing with it just as much as we are, if not more, in different ways, though.
Yeah, and I would add, one of the questions that we've been asking at my institution that is asked of ourselves here, and one that's relevant to us, the question we ask ourselves is, we state, we often ask our students if they are school ready, but we should probably be asking our schools if they are student ready. And really, and this came, she isn't the person who came up with this. This is something that's been said quite a bit. But Gloria Ladson-Billings was our morning keynote speaker, who is, kind of the person who wrote some incredible and very important pieces of literature, of research that have really driven school reform. And they were written in the mid-'90s, and she's still incredibly relevant today. So when you hear the term culturally relevant pedagogy, she's the one that coined that and really spoke a lot to, how we can, connect more with students, shared a lot of examples, talked a lot about depth versus coverage. And this is a debate we've had in our community around depth versus coverage. High failure rate does not equal rigor. A lot of institutions, and this was coming more from a university perspective, where she gets lambasted in the School of Ed because they have the highest GPA at UW-Madison, but then again, they don't get students till they're juniors, whereas you're comparing apples and oranges. But her point of kind of less is more. Many of us and I'm speaking about myself as an educator, like this balance of coverage, right? And our teachers often feel that sticky tension between covering a large amount of material but then going deep. And it's hard to do both, especially with the limited time we have at the university level. Yeah, it was a good conversation with partners from all these institutions, and the idea is to increase the graduation rate across the state to 60% by 2027, from a higher
At
education.
higher education.
At higher ed. At higher ed.
For all students.
For all students. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
So
because there's a pretty big gap there for students of color, so.
there's a tremendous gap. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the superintendent's evaluation on here just to discuss, and to make sure everybody understands what's gonna happen, so, we will meet, in closed session next Tuesday, to at least start the superintendent's evaluation. His contract is currently through June 30th of 2021. And if we were going to not renew, we would have to give notice by January 31st of 2020. So we need to have that conversation. So we wanted to start, we always do our superintendent's evaluations in December. So as I said to you guys, there will be a folder that you guys will get with last year's evaluation, the mid-year evaluation, and then all the surveys that were done, and reports. So is there anything else that I should put in the folder for you before we meet? And then Brian will also write a self-evaluation that will be included.
Given our conversation earlier, would those addendums be included
Yes,
in there?
all that will be in there. Yeah, I just need to, that's why I was saying I need to pull those out and do it, so. Okay, so, so that's just to let you guys know what the plan is. All right, we have a spring election coming up. And so there are 3 of us who are incumbents, myself, Pablo, and Clark. All 3 of us are running again. Candidates who are interested in running need to file. So the information is on board books. Candidates who are interested in running, the deadline is January 7th at 5 p.m. And Kelly, they would need to drop that off in your office, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the election would be April 7th. So Emily has worked with the village, and we will be, we'll advertise this, but on Thursday, December 19th, the village is having a kind of open session around candidacy that we will also be participating in at 5 p.m.
Did they talk to you? Because they followed up? Okay, because I just connected the dots. I didn't.
Okay.
know. I just am like, did that
But do
really
you remember
happen?
where it was?
In the village center. So
In the village center. So,
I think, right?
So would Emily and I go as the board?
anybody can go. I mean, we'll
resource?
post it, like if
Yeah.
any of you guys want to go.
Okay.
It's- Well, you won't be here. December 19th, 5 p.m. And anybody who's interested in running can always email any of us. Happy to talk to you about it.
Can we highlight the uniqueness of this election,
Yeah.
given the appointment seat
Yes.
and why there are 3
Oh,
rather than
yeah,
2?
Yeah.
Sure.
Or would you like me to? I will highlight why there are 3 seats rather than 2, because of the appointment of Clark to the vacancy created by Dr. Weinhardt stepping down this election. When we appointed Clark, fills the term that he would have, or,
For 1
excuse me,
year.
I want to correct
It's
myself,
only 1 year.
fulfills the position to the election date.
Yes.
And then that candidate needs to run, and so we have 3 candidates for school board rather than the traditional 2 for this election. I don't know
And
that I
then the-
described that.
And then the
That's
third
right.
highest vote getter has to run again in a year.
Yes.
Yes,
So the top 2 will get 3-year terms.
and the third would get 1
highest
year.
finisher gets a 1-year term.
Right. Any other unique things I missed?
It's primary season. Got a county executive board race.
Well,
I mean, it's a big
There's-
election.
There's
so
going to be a lot
it's- yeah,
happening,
hopefully
yes.
a
A
good
lot
turnout.
happening in 2020 around
So,
elections.
Vote through, every opportunity.
Okay, and we're going to bring Marta back to get the budget year-to-date. And Pablo can ask the question about
Yeah,
special ed.
So in front of you, you have expenditures, revenues and expenditures as of end of November. As you see, our deficit in general fund is 6.4 million. So we're using fund balance and short-term borrowing. We will receive our first property tax payment January 15th. I wanted to kind of summarize Fund 21. There was a question before. So Fund 21 is a special revenue fund, is where we receive our donations. There's some changes this school year in Fund 60. So Fund 60 is student activity account. So in order to comply with all the changes, we're going to be moving money from Fund 60 to Fund 21. We're in the process of doing that. Most of the money in Fund 21 comes from the Seed Foundation. I have listed the donations that we received this year, and we're very grateful for the generous donations. So far this year, the district received $318,324.31. And this is the fund that if money is not spent from year to year, it carries over. So, some funds you start from zero. If there's any donations made, if that money is not spent from one year to another, that money will be carried over. Do you have any?
So can I ask about the what did you say in here? Sorry, I'm having a hard time reading this now. You wanted to look at Fund 60 because of kind of this, I guess GASB 84?
GASB 84, yes.
Yeah, so what did they do? What is the change?
So there's multiple changes.
Okay.
In past, we had, you didn't have to keep the accounting on the financial software. Some of the school district had kept accounting in Quickens or some other softwares. In our school district, we always had it in Skyward. You didn't have to report that to DPI. So what happened is, at the end of the year, the district will just do an entry due from, and that's no longer is acceptable. Also, in terms of the procedures, how the money is handled, it's different. That in past that there was some student involvement, but it was subject to district's procedures when it comes to purchasing. And in order to do that, like, you're not able to enforce the district procedures and still comply with the GASB 84 because it removes that it removes all the procedures and gives the students flexibility in terms of how to spend money and not comply with the board policy. So what schools are doing in Wisconsin is either they're eliminating Fund 60 or they're moving money to Fund 21 to still be able to fundraise and buy things, and also do that according to the board policy. So have the checks and balances in place.
Okay.
If we were to ask you a walkthrough of how that's going to, how those checks and balances, just like on the side, do I just go through? Okay.
Yeah.
So as you see, in order for us to keep all the funds separately, we're assigning a unique function for all the advisors, so we can still keep track of that money, and that money will be carried over from year to year.
Okay, Pablo, you can answer your question.
No, it's just about anticipating the DPI superintendent's visit with SWASA and those of us that are able to attend on January 7th. And she'll be advocating for 60% funding from the state at special ed, for special ed. And we know that over the last decades, it's gone down from more than 60% down to about 26.5%. And we wrote a resolution a year and a half ago, we were one of the first districts and really helped champion that. What that's done is I guess my question is, because our special ed support that we get from the state is not enough to meet the needs that we have, what kind of budgetary impact does that have on our programming, and what happens when we don't have enough? Do we need to pull from our general fund and then put it in special ed? Not to pit one against the other, but I think it's important to have that discussion. And those are a lot of the discussions I have when I'm outside of Shorewood, lobbying and advocating for increased funding. And I think it's important to enlighten everybody that and for us to know, the impact that has on our own programming and how that does tie our hands to some extent.
So the school district is required to provide education for special education students based on IEPs. The state, as well as federal government, fund certain percentage, but does not fund to the extent that it's required. So the school district makes a transfer from general fund to Fund 27 to help offset some of the expenses, and that transfer was over $2 million. So it's a substantial amount of money, and obviously that amount keeps going up. If there is no increase from the state and federal government, there's going to be more money transferred from general fund, which means you're going to have to make adjustments in order to make this work. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the budget update? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a consent agenda. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Public comments?
Sarah McNay, 2616 East Jarvis Street. I think in the FAQ there needs to be clarification about the school emergency plan. When I read that school safety initiative grants contain information that may be vital to school district safety and security, if released publicly, such information could negatively impact school safety measures, enable individuals to evade school security, and endanger the safety of students, teachers, and other employees. That's for just the safety grant part of things. I think that there needs to be an explanation to the community as to why every individual can't go and see our school district management safety plan. It says here that if there was a public records request, it would have to be balanced in a balancing test, and that the right to refuse that information is available to the school district. So I think that, if that's about school safety grants, does that connect to the school's emergency management plan, which I'm assuming it does, but I don't know. Thank you.
Anyone else? No?
Kelly, you said you wanted to speak. This is the last.
Oh, sorry. I know. I was looking at her, and then I was like, well, maybe she's.
I couldn't hear.
Oh, sorry.
Hi again,
Hello.
Kelly Salas. I want to talk with you guys tonight about math instruction at the middle school as it relates to the superintendent's performance. To the operational expectations that the board must consider when in your evaluation of the superintendent are instructional program and learning environment. And I have been, as many of you know, actively advocating to improve math teaching and learning at the middle school. Having a daughter right now in 7th grade and a daughter in 9th grade that just finished at SIS last year. So through this process, I've had the opportunity to engage with the superintendent and for those who work directly for him and observe their words and actions when faced with this major issue in instructional program and learning environment. I've seen that concerns about math at SIS have been raised by many different parents in many venues. The board and administration have the test score data, obviously. You have parent feedback from the SIS linkage that was held recently. I think some of us were there together. It was clear at that linkage that math was a big concern for the majority of the parents at the table. Those were not people that I knew prior to going into that meeting, but I noticed that many of them shared the same concerns that I have for my children. You guys have data and parent testimony from a school board meeting earlier this year where the test results were discussed, and I believe several people commented at that meeting. I didn't come to that meeting, but I saw the video. You have data that the SIS principal and other district administrators have collected in their conversations that they've been having with parents, I'm certain. So we know the board and superintendent are well aware of the issue here with math instruction at SIS and of people's comments and concerns in the district. So in my daughter's experience, and I'm speaking of my 9th grade daughter right now, so in the experience that she had and in my conversations with other parents, I've observed a common thread, and that is block scheduling and instructional quality, and especially instructional quality at the 7th grade level, are two major roadblocks that are standing in the way of math success for children at SIS. And I've shared these concerns with many of you. I know several other parents who have done the same. And I also met and sat down with Mike Joint. I also met and sat down with the new Pupil Services Director, Julie Harris, and I encouraged both of them to look at and really examine any groups of students who are being disparately impacted, especially by block scheduling as it relates to math. I've tried to convey to all of those folks, including the superintendent, that for many children, especially for children with ADHD, having to pay attention in math class for 90 minutes at a time is problematic. It's tough. It's 90 minutes. So we need to look at what's going on in those 90 minutes, and we need to look at what children are doing during those 90 minutes and who's being able to attend and be productive for that whole length of time and who's not. But then on the off days, it's equally problematic that they have no math, so then they miss out on critical daily routine and practice that, especially in the case of my daughter, she needed every day, and I believe that there are many other children in that camp. So this brings me to a question again about communication and about a plan of action. And so as a parent who's raised these concerns, the only concrete plan that I know about is for the SIS math teachers to have students complete daily exit tickets in the math class. And this is to help the teachers know which students understand the material and which students need more help. So like, I view this as one possible component of a strategy to improve teaching and learning in math, but it's a tweak. Like, it's not an overhaul. It's not enough. And so, like, I'm looking at this, I'm talking with Mike Joint, I'm saying a lot more than that is gonna be needed, but I don't see any plan in store that I'm aware of. So as you guys are evaluating, you know, as the board is evaluating our superintendent and looking at these things, looking at the areas of instructional program and learning environment, exit tickets are not enough. The superintendent should be well aware by now that we need much more than a few tweaks to improve math achievement. Perhaps more is being done, but it hasn't been communicated. If more input is going to be sought from parents, staff, and students, that hasn't been communicated. If we're gonna reconsider block scheduling and possibly return to teaching math every day at SIS, as I believe we should, that hasn't been communicated that that's even on the table or being considered. And so the board needs to hold the superintendent accountable to create and communicate a concrete plan to greatly improve, not just improve a little bit, but greatly improve math instruction at SIS. And then if I could just take another moment, I have another issue that I wanted to speak with you about, and that is the concern that I find demonstrates a pattern of failed communication on the superintendent's part, and as well as a troubling treatment of community stakeholders. So I'm a member, as you guys know, of or some of you know, of the district's diversity work group, and as a member of that committee, I received a letter yesterday from the superintendent ensuring me that the diversity work group had not been disbanded. When I received that letter, it was in direct contradiction to all information that I received from the superintendent from September through yesterday. So while it may be true that the diversity work group now has scheduled some meetings, there's one on the 17th, I think, of December, and then I think there's another one in March, and there's another one in June, I think. the notice for those meetings just appeared, and it just was kind of sudden and unannounced on where the board agendas appear or whatever. Last Friday, I think, I don't know, sometime late last week. And prior to that date, myself and other members of the work group, basically we were spent the entire fall since September, when the diversity work group held its one and only meeting so far this year, trying to convince the superintendent to maintain regular meetings of the diversity work group. And we were told no on not just one occasion, but on multiple occasions. So these meetings that are now on the schedule were only added after multiple attempts to convince the superintendent that the group shouldn't be disbanded, and multiple requests to continue meeting. The first of these requests that I am aware of was made by one of the members of the work group. I believe that request went to Sam, but I believe Sam and the superintendent discussed it. The second of these requests that I'm aware of was made by Shorewood Moving Forward, and it went directly to the superintendent, but not to the board. And I was told at the Shorewood Moving Forward meeting, I don't remember the date of the meeting, but it was the last Shorewood Moving Forward meeting. And I think Emily has a report on it, actually, so I'm sure we have it. That the response to that letter was no, we won't reinstate the meetings. Then Shorewood Moving Forward decided to send an additional letter that was then copied excuse me, to the board, and then after that letter the meetings are now scheduled. So was it disbanded? Was the diversity work group disbanded? I mean, after the meeting in September, there was no plans for us to meet. There was multiple requests to meet that were denied. Yet we were asked, and I know you're looking curiously at me, so we were asked as the diversity work group to participate in the strategic plan, which I have done, which many of the work group members have done, which many of you have done, which is important work. I fully support, I agree, I want to participate. And as I said at the September meeting for the diversity work group, we shouldn't stop the work group to help with the strategic plan. We need to do both. Like, we need to have a place for nuts and bolts of equity on the ground in the district. And the work group is the one place that we had for that as parents. You guys have other arenas that you have for it, I get that. But as parents, that was our venue for that work. And that was a committed group, a long-term committed group, a multiracial group of parents. We hire an equity director, and then we don't have the group anymore. Or we're not gonna meet for a year. Which led us to request to continue to meet and to not disband the group. I also just want to note one last thing, that at the first of those strategic plan meetings, some of you may remember the superintendent asked one of the students, and I don't remember the student's name, but it was a student that was involved in equity work through a student organization. That student stood up and spoke about the equity work that students have been doing in the district. Kelly Steiner stood up and spoke, I think it was Kelly Steiner, stood up and spoke about the equity work that teachers and staff have been doing in the district. There was no parent that stood up. There was no mention at that meeting of the diversity work group. So I noticed that. Like, I felt that was erasure of the group. And that there were several parents there that have been on that committee that could have pointed out the work that we've been engaged in as parents. And that did not happen. So to summarize, the diversity work group, our members wanted to maintain the work group. We wanted it to be a place for nuts and bolts discussion of the equity work. And in my experience, the superintendent pushed back on that request for 3 months, from September until last week, when there was no other choice. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Kelly. Just confirming, nobody else? Okay. Review of to-do items?
Okay, so I can take a look at outside vendors, working with Chief Nimmer, along with Marta, to look at bringing back maybe some options in January, as far as vendors to look at safety review items. Just taking into consideration just the ideas that we had regarding IC communications, things during the safety conversation, improvements like new hires, all staff training, just taking that back to the administrative team and working that within our plan. So a variety of things in that regard. And then looking at communication overall, just regarding safety, from our FAQ list to some of the things that were mentioned tonight regarding safety plan and that type of thing. So to be able to get that out, get that taken care of.
For me, I need to, I'll go back and look at OE1 and update that. Was there anything else? I guess I will have Kelly send out an email about next week's meeting on the 19th. If more than 2 of us are planning on being there, I actually just post it, Kelly, to make sure that, and then, Brian, can you work with Caitlin to make sure that's advertised?
Yes.
That meeting on the 19th?
On the 19th, yeah.
Future agenda items? Yeah.
I met with Amy Miller to talk to her as a continuation of something I mentioned about Black Lives Matter in schools week of action, which is this first week in February. And we brainstormed some things that the SEA might do, and that the district might support, and then just who else might want to be engaged. But one of the concrete things that would be a specific agenda item is a joint resolution. So I'm going to work on drafting that and bring it to you in January, and then that would give the SEA also a chance to, their board to sign it.
I think we also then need to, February is I Love My Public School Month week. It will also happen during that week. I guess I need to confirm what week the Black Lives Matter week is.
It's the 3rd through the 9th, I think. Is that
Okay, so
is
this
that-
one falls
that's right on
during
the calendar?
Valentine's Day. So
Oh, right. So
we
it's
can
the
do
week
both.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then one of the things I also did related to that week is reach out to Youth Rising Up to ask like what they might have wanted to be doing during that week, if they would, prefer to see the district like sponsor something, or they want to do something more student driven and we just support that. And so I have not heard back from them, but what I was hoping is to just go to their next meeting and just hear from them like what they want us to do.
So the board to do, or the district to
The
do?
district or board or whatever, so.
Okay. Okay.
All of the above. And then Shorewood Moving Forward also has a group of people there who had like signed up and said that they wanted to do some, so the community. So what I'm hoping is just to connect all these people so they're talking to each other, and, I don't see this as something where the district necessarily has to sponsor every single thing, but that we all know what we're doing. And
Okay. Did you have something?
No, the only thing I had from the last meeting, which I realized I neglected to forward to you, was you having an HRC report. Do
Yeah.
you have an HRC maybe I'm
Oh, no. Oh, you mean, sorry. I was going to talk about that, so I was a little confused as to how you
Oh.
read my mind. So the first HRC I went to, the report was in the last
But you need to do
meeting.
another one.
Right. So that's Thursday. I will not be at it.
Okay.
However,
You'll get
what I really wanted to talk about, yes, I'll get minutes. I did follow up and meet with Sarah about trying to coordinate some of the work they were trying to do about the connection conversation. How do we drive that? Some bias. So there's
Wait, what are you talking about?
so last meeting.
Oh, how is
Yep.
Last meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, last meeting we had talked that I was going to follow up with HRC's education committee.
Okay.
Sarah Spencer.
Sarah Spencer.
Sorry.
What did I say?
You looked at that one, and then
You
I was
looked
like,
at that,
I'm
Sarah, and
confused.
No,
then
I was
you're
looking at
talking about C.
I was looking
Okay.
at Brian. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, my
Okay.
point is that might be an agenda item for January because there's, I'll call it a pilot. I'll know more about it as
Okay,
once we
let
hear
me,
about it.
let me know.
So,
Anything else? So, I do wanna say, and I guess I kinda need to hear from you guys. I got an email about, football here at the high school and the possibility of changing it from, I don't know, I guess tackle, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
To,
tackle.
flag football? And whether or not we've ever considered that. So,
yes, you heard it correctly. He looked
the high school football team, like no longer doing, tackling, concussions.
But is that really a board decision? And wouldn't we, because we have 2 schools in the football program, like, we would have to.
Well, this is all just, I mean, so
It was,
maybe I
she
should
got
have
the
you,
request forwarded to her.
can you, I guess, so maybe you can talk to LeVar? I have no idea like how those decisions would be made.
About a program offering?
Uh-huh.
I suppose we could just, if we
Yeah.
passed a policy that said there is no tackle football.
Jack, what's your question?
So-
'Cause you
We
still
could
look
say it's like
confused.
health related. What? You're confused?
So if someone wants, like,
Correct, with
like
flag.
our football team or?
Yeah.
Well,
Would s-
if
would-
our
How
team
can we
became flag football, wouldn't all the other
Yeah,
teams have to be
how
flag
can we do
football?
that?
I mean, yes, yes.
I mean, that it's only right.
Short education
Yes.
at work.
Yes, that's
That's
true.
a legitimate question to work out.
Yes.
I think that she
I-
was asking, and I think this is a legitimate question that the
It
board
is.
would consider given our concern about health and wellness. Have we talked about it? I have no idea what the conversation at the high school level is, so. And
Maybe-
probably most people would make that face that you made, but I will forward it to you, and maybe you can talk to LeVar and follow up on like where we're at with it.
Sure.
Okay.
If not a policy discussion, like maybe we do
Or
get
you
an
add
update
a
on,
program.
from the conference about
Offering an
the
Yeah,
safety
like maybe the
measures.
conference
you'd
is
have-
talking about it. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, you couldn't do that just that here. I mean, you have to do it.
Well, no, then they wouldn't have anybody to play against.
Right.
No, I get that. I get
Just do a
that.
rec department.
Go undefeated.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Then you'd have.
School board squad.
Okay, I think that's all I can think of right now. So we are in recess. Thank you.